The exercise files for today's course are located in the video description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Google Sheets Introduction. My name is Joe, and I am so glad you're here and excited to have you join us for our Google Sheets adventure. In this course, we will help you learn the essentials of Google Sheets, whether you're a complete beginner or just looking to sharpen your skills. This course will guide you through the basics of Google Sheets, from data entry and formatting to simple calculations and functions. By the end, you'll feel confident using Google Sheets for various tasks.
Looking to support our channel and get a great deal? Become a member today to unlock ad-free videos. That's right, your favorite courses without a single ad. Interested in a specific video? Purchase one of our ad-free courses individually. Looking for even more? Gain access to exams, certificates, and exclusive content at LearnitAnytime.com. More information can be found in the video description below.
To get to Google Sheets, the first thing we'll do is open up a web browser. I'm going to be using Google Chrome today, but you're more than welcome to use whichever browser that you're comfortable with. So I'm going to open up my Google Chrome here. And in the top right-hand corner, you'll see your Google apps. Now, if you're not signed into this yet, you might have to. You might just have to go in and then sign in using your Google account, your Gmail here, and then whatever password you set up. Once you're signed in, you could just click on those apps. And this is where you'll see all the different Google apps you have available to you. Now, the one that we're going to be focusing on for this course is Google Sheets. So we'll give that a click. And then once we open up our Google Sheets there, it's going to bring us to the landing page. Now, the landing page is great because this is where we can either create a blank worksheet, we can see some of the templates that Google has available to us, we can access what we've been working on the previous 30 days, and not only that, we can also search for any of our files up top. So this is the nice, simple way to access all of your different Google Sheets, or being able to access those templates, or being able to access this blank spreadsheet, which that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's all go over to blank spreadsheet. We're going to click on that, and we're going to build a financial ledger, or maybe not. We'll figure out what we'll do. Maybe we'll do something with, we'll switch it up. We'll do something with students or something. We'll have fun with it though. So here, I'm going to just click into blank spreadsheet. And right away, we are now in our main interface. So you'll see up top, we have a way to name this sheet. And I'm going to do that right away. And once you name it, it'll stay that name unless you want to rename it again. You're more than welcome to. And I'm just going to call this, let's do this one. Student scoring information. Student scoring information. I'm going to press enter, and it saves right away to your Google Drive. So that's pretty cool. Right away, we notice that it has a automatic saving. Now, taking a look at the interface, you'll see right over to the right, it starts to ask you, hey, do you want to build some pre-built tables? There's a couple other features that you have access to. So this is pretty cool. Once again, bringing in those templates there, and look at that. If you are new, or maybe you don't know where to start, you can quickly go in and take a look at all the different things that it has available to you. But we're going to have fun. We're going to create our own from scratch. So we'll click the X on that. We're going to just start from blank here. Another thing that's really important with this is up top, you'll see your different menus. We have the file menu. And when you click on it, you'll see the menu then drop down, and you can look at all the things you can do in the file menu: edit, view, insert, format, data, tools, extensions, and even help. If you do need to search the menus, you're more than welcome to do that. And also, if you like this training, of course, you can utilize it. But if you do want more resources to training, Google does have their own here under training. So that's pretty cool. And also they have their function list and keyboard shortcuts if you want to learn those. But we'll go through a couple of those throughout the training. Now, besides that, we also have what's known as our quick access tools. And these quick access tools are some of the most frequently used tools by Google Sheets. You can once again search the menu. That's the same as going to help, clicking search the menu. So all of these tools here are actually up top here as well. But these are the most accessible ones. Undo, redo, print, format painter, right? Or paint format, copies of format. You have to do, but you can zoom in and out of the worksheet. You have currency format, percentage format, decimal increasing and decreasing, and also more formats as well, where you can change what the number looks like. Always remember format means the appearance. You then have your tools for the text itself. What kind of font do you want to use? Increase or decrease the font size. So formatting like bold, italicized, strike through, and also changing the text color. You can also change the background of the cells. So if you want a cell to be a certain color, you're more than welcome to. You can add borders to those cells and then also merge the cells as well. You can align your text if you want it center or to the right or to the left. You can do vertical alignment, top, middle, bottom, and also text wrapping if you want to do overflow or wrapping or clip, and then rotation of your text. So there's a ton of different options here. A couple of the other ones down here are inserting links, comments. You can insert charts for visualizing your data, turn on filters, or take a look at some of the filter views that you have. We'll talk about this in another session. And then also functions, all the different functions, and then all of them are categorized. You can either go to arrays, database, data, engineering. So they have a ton of things here that you can look at. Now, when we're talking about using the interface here, one of the most important things is knowing where you are in the worksheet. So for instance, what Google Sheets does well is it utilizes what's known as columns and rows. So that's how we reference cells. These are the columns going across here, and these columns are indicated by alphabet, right? So characters A, B, C, D. We then have, of course, going down here, the rows. And these rows are indicated by numeric value. So just numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you select into a certain cell, like right here, I'm selected on B5, you're always going to name the column first, column B, and then what row you're selected on, 5. And you'll even see over here in our name box, it tells you you've selected it, B5. Another thing that's really important when we're talking about cell reference is what's inside of a cell, right? So right next to the name box where we just saw it tells you what cell you're in, you'll see also we have our formula bar. And this formula bar is super important because it tells us the truest value of a cell. So you might be thinking, well, what does that mean? Well, let's say I did something like that. I click into a cell and I do this. And then I click into the cell and I do this. Well, looking at these, they look identical, right? They don't look like they're different at all, but they're completely different. One of these values is a 1, and one of these values is some sort of calculation. But which one's which? Well, that's where the formula bar comes in. If I click into this cell, it tells me that this is actually a calculation. It's 1 to 0, which equals 1. And it tells me that this cell, I just typed in the number 1. So even though they look the same, they're completely different. And that's why the formula bar is super important, not only for writing formulas, but for knowing what really is in these cells. So I'm just going to clear that out. But try this out for your own real quick. I want you to sign into Google Sheets. I want you to open up a blank worksheet, take a look around, get familiar with some of the tools that they have to offer. And then when we come back, we're going to start to enter in some data into this worksheet. Now that we know a little bit more about the interface, we're going to start entering data. And today we're going to do our student scoring information. Now, in order to do that, we can't just start entering data in. Like I can't just start entering a bunch of numbers because you might be thinking, well, what are those numbers? It's always a good idea to label your columns, and those are known as headers. So we're going to create a title first. Let's click into A1, and we're just going to call this student scoring. And then in A3, we're going to start to put our headers in to really describe what kind of data is going into our columns. Starting off with our student's ID. I'm then going to press the tab key to go over to the next cell. Now, you can either press the tab key next to the Q on your keyboard to go to the right, or you can use Shift tab to go to the left. You can press Enter to confirm and then go down if you press Enter twice, or you can hold the Shift key and press Enter twice to go back up. You can also just simply use arrow keys or click into each cell. So totally up to you. There's no right or wrong on those. But yeah, let's continue to fill in what kind of information is going in here. So we'll have the first name, and then we'll have the last name. Let's also do the email, the birthday. We'll say birth date. Let's do also class attendance. Now I want to do the class attendance for each quarter. So we'll have attendance quarter 1. And we could just say QTR1. But before we go and have to rewrite that a ton of times, I actually want to talk about this real quick. You'll see that whenever we click into each cell, we actually get this little ball icon, right? And that little dot or ball is actually autofill. What it does is it follows a pattern. Now, I'm going to show you how it can fill in series, and then later on when we get into calculations, functions, and formulas, we'll talk about how it works with those. But for now, let's say I want to just repeat the number 1. I can actually do that by clicking and dragging, and you'll see it just repeats the number 1 as many times as I want. I can also choose to do sequential order. For instance, I'll put a 1 and then a 2. And now I can say, okay, I'm going to either click and drag, or after you select those 2, you can do a double click, and you'll see it's in sequential order. Because we're telling the system, hey, listen, we're going from 1 to 2, which is increments of 1. I can do 2 to 4 and do increments of 2. Select them both, double click on the ball. There we go. But what's awesome is not only that, we can also do things like dates. I can put in a date. Let's do this date. And then I can double click and it'll put it in sequential order. Pretty cool. I can also do January, double click, or even non-abbreviated January, double click, Monday, day of the week, or even non-abbreviated Monday. Or another thing I can do is maybe I want to do week 1, and it will automatically put it in sequential order. And not only can we do this going down vertically, but we can do this horizontally. For example, with our attendance for each quarter, I can just click and drag. That'll be quarter 2, that'd be 3, that'd be 4. And look at that. How awesome is that? We don't have to sit there and write it 4 times. We just write it once, and then it does it for us. Now I'm going to take all of this. I want to delete this out. So you could just select it all and press the delete key, not the backspace. You could do backspace if you want, but I always like to use the delete key. So I'll show that again. You can either select it all and use delete key or backspace, but I always use the delete key. Next up, we're going to put into column J3, we'll do a total attendance. So we'll just say total attendance. And you might notice as of right now that we're cutting some stuff off, right? We're cutting off the 1, the 2, the 3, and now the 4. We're going to talk about how to fix that in a second, but let's put in the rest of our headers here. We're also going to keep track of scoring, right? So I want to see what they scored on test 1, test 2, and then their final test. We'll then in column N3, put in their average score. And then in column O3, we'll put in whether they've passed. So we'll say pass/fail. Now, once again, this is pushing really far. We can't see everything, and we have to also fix the attendance. You can do this by going up to the top between the columns where you want to change the width, for instance, F and G, and I can click and drag to make this bigger, click and drag, or click and drag to make it smaller. But if you want it to be an exact fit, you could just give a quick double click and it will auto size it for you. 1, 2. Look how nice that looks. 1, 2. Now, if you want to fix this all at once, let's say they're all squished in a little bit and you want everything to be auto-sized really nicely, you can actually select right here underneath the name box, this little rectangle. And when you click on that, it selects every single column and row. Once you do that, you can go between any column and double click, and it will actually auto adjust the entire spreadsheet. So that's a little trick that I like to use. So try this out on your own. And then once we come back, we're going to start entering in some data. Now that we have our headers and everything is auto width, we will now start to put in our information. So as we enter in the data here, I'll just enter in some fake data for 10 students. So I'm going to do that autofill technique I showed you before, where you put in a 1 and then a 2, and then we can just click and drag from our autofill and we'll fill in 10 students. After this, we'll then put in some names. So let's just do some fake names here. John, Joe, Jane, Smith. And then you could take your time with this, pause the video. I'll go through a little quicker, but you're more than welcome to pause at any moment. We'll add in just a couple of fake names here. And you're going to love what we learn in a second. This is going to be a lot of fun when we create the emails. So just a couple more here. Max Walker and Olivia Lewis. All right. So now let's say that we want to put in some emails. I'm going to make those emails a little bigger by just clicking and dragging the column D width, because I know I want those to be the full email. Now for the email, we're just going to do a first name, last name at email.com. Very simple and just fake. So you might be thinking, well, wow, that's going to take us a minute to do, right? We have to put in John Doe. Or you might be thinking, well, Joe, I've heard there's ways to do strings of text like concatenation and different advanced functions you can use. And all of that would be correct. But there is an awesome new feature known as Smart Fill that is accessible to us within Google Sheets. And what Smart Fill does, it's kind of like autofill, where it follows a pattern, but it's following a pattern with our names here, our strings of text. So watch this. Let's click into D4 and type in john.o@email.com. And then we'll press enter. We'll then do the next one. Smith@email.com. And then press enter. Now, when we do the last one, you're going to see something here. It says, hey, Smart Fill, we have a formula suggestion. We think we can fill these cells using a formula to help you out so that you don't have to continue to do all that work. And I'm going to say, you know what? Thank you so much, Google Sheets. And we'll click the little check mark here. Or you can also use Control plus Shift plus Y to do the rest of the Smart Fill. Now I'm just going to do a little check mark. And how awesome is this? And you might have heard me just say, hey, we might have wanted to do concatenation, right? Well, it is actually using a concat function up top. So using the concatenate function, it's saying, let's take the first name with a period and the last name, and then add in @email.com. So it's doing it for us. And we didn't even need to know how to do that function. Now, later on, if you decide that you don't want these to be functions, you're more than welcome to copy these And you can copy something by right-clicking, and cut means to actually take it and move it. Copy means to take it, make a copy, and then move it. And paste means, well, to paste it in there. But there are a couple of really cool options here under Paste Special, where we can copy or cut the function result and paste it as a value instead, so it's not an actual function. That way it's just the email. So I'm going to take all this. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to cut it. And then I'm going to right-click, Paste Special, and I'm going to say values only. That way it's actually a value instead of a function. Pretty cool. Now we can fill in the rest of the data. All right. But before we fill in the rest of the data, try that out, fill in some of those data sets there, and also use SmartFill. So now that we know a little bit more about SmartFill, we're going to fill in the rest of the data here. And once again, you can pause this video at any time you want to. You're going to enter in some fake dates here. We'll do just random ones. I'm just using some data that we looked up from artificial intelligence, which is something that is amazing. It allows for us instructors and trainers to actually come up with fake data a lot quicker. So we don't have to go and do name generation or anything like that. We could just say, hey, give us 10 names and 10 different birth dates. And then we'll just come up with a bunch of them. So that's how I've been using it. But of course, people use AI all types of ways. But once again, I'll be just filling these out, and we'll fill in all this data. We're going to just use a random number. You don't have to do that part with me when we do fill this out. You can actually just fill out the numbers. I'll do the same thing we sort of did with the email, where I use a function to come up with random numbers, but then I will utilize the cut and then paste special just to add them in as values. So they're not constantly changing. You'll see what I mean in a moment. But just finish entering this data here. We have a couple more. And I think that's it. Awesome. Okay, so we got some birthdays in there. So now I'm going to, once again, just use a function. You do not have to do this with me. I'm going to use something known as rand between, where we just pick a random number between 2 and 5. So it's the random integer. It's known as the rand between function. It'll ask for a low part of the number, 2, a high part, which is 5. And when I press enter, it's just a random number between 2 and 5. And I can autofill, and we'll learn about that later on. And I'm just doing that for quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. The only problem is if something changes in your data, like if I write below here, these change again. So we want to be sure that those aren't constantly changing. So I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to right click, cut it, right click, and paste as the values only. So once again, you just copy the same numbers that you see here, but don't use random between like I did. That was just to get the numbers. Take a moment to fill in and enter in the rest of the data. And then when we come back, we're actually going to talk about how we can find the total attendance and what the difference between calculations, functions, and formulas are. All right, so we're going to have a lot of fun with that. Before we go and try to find the total attendance, what we're going to do is talk about the difference between calculations, formulas, and functions. So this part's really for you to just sit back, relax for a moment. I'm going to actually add a worksheet. So you'll see we do have a sheet 1, and you're always more than welcome to click on that little drop down if you want to rename the sheet, if you want to change the color of the sheet or project it or duplicate it. But I'm just going to click the little plus icon, add another sheet here, just so I can showcase the difference between calculations, formulas, and functions. And once again, you don't have to do this with me. We will have some fun with formulas, functions, and calculations in a little bit. So let's say I have a little bit of data here, right? Maybe I have some numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what I want to do is I actually want to calculate the sum of those numbers. Now, that's great. And Google Sheets has many ways to do this. But which way is the most efficient way? Well, that's where it comes down to calculations, formulas, and functions. I'm going to showcase the difference between these and ones that are really great to use and ones that you'll probably never use. Anytime we do use calculations, formulas, or functions, we have to start off with a universal sign of mathematics, which is our equal sign. That prompts the system to know that we're trying to do some sort of calculation, formula, or function. Now that we have the equal sign, I'm going to do a calculation. A calculation, it sounds like calculator, right? And it works very similar to a calculator. After I put my equals, I just type in the numbers like a calculator. So I want to add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. And when I press enter, I get 15. That worked really great, but that was a little slow, right? It wasn't too fast. And another thing is, what happens if our data changes, right? Data's always changing. I go in here and do something like that. Well, look at that. The data is an update. So that's known as being dynamic or not dynamic. And in this case, calculations are not dynamic. And I'll change that back to a 5. So calculations are slow and they're not dynamic. You might be thinking, well, when would we use them? And I'll just say that you'll probably never use calculations in Google Sheets, unless you just want to do a quick calculation of numbers that's temporary and then delete it. If it has nothing to do with your data, you'd probably use it. But if you're working with data, calculations are not the way to go. That's where formulas step in, right? That's the next step up. See, formulas are a little different because they're not calculating just the number values, right? The numbers. They're calculating whatever's in the cell. So we're going to start off and do equals. And instead of typing 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, we're going to do whatever's in B3 plus whatever's in B4 plus B5 plus B6 plus B7. You'll even see it does a little color code for you. I love that. And when I press enter, there we go. We get the answer. Now, I will admit that was still slow, but is it dynamic? Well, take a look. I'm going to change that 5 to a 15, and there it is. How cool is that, right? It is dynamic. Awesome. So let's take a look at formulas next and talk about why we would use them, right? So formulas, we would use them, even though they're slow, they are dynamic, as we just saw. We would use them most of the time for multiplying. I use formulas a lot for multiplying and also dividing, because we don't really have a function to divide well. I mean, there's functions out there for multiplying and dividing, but formulas are going to work way more efficient. So I always say formulas are really great, again, if you're doing any multiplying or dividing of cells. And now we have our last thing, which is functions. Functions are actually formulas. They're formulas that Google pre-created already for us to use. Now, there's a huge list of functions. You can just go to your quick access toolbar and you'll see the little functions icon. And when you click on that icon, it'll tell you all your aggregate functions like sum, average, count, max, and min. And then it also has all of your functions all categorized. And you can even learn more functions that are available. And they're always adding new ones, like this one right here. This is awesome. They now are using regex. And regex is a unique code that you can use to extract things, match and replace them. It's pretty cool. But they're constantly adding all different types of things. Lookups, right? The new XLOOKUP. Awesome. But we're just going to keep it simple for today. We are using the sum function, right? The sum function allows for us to add things together. You'll always see your top aggregate right up top here. So we're going to click in once again Any calculation formula or function starts off with an equal sign. We're going to choose what function we want. I'm using the sum function. We're going to press the tab key right after you write your function, right next to that Q on your keyboard. If you press that tab key, it opens up the parentheses, and then you can select a whole range of cells, right? When you select one cell, it's just a cell, and you select a range of cells like that. So you'll hear that analogy often. When I press enter, I get the answer. Yeah, it will do some autofill here, it looks like. I don't know what it's trying to autofill, so I'll say no on that one. But I wasn't teaching this. This is how fast this would be. Ready? Equals sum, tab, select, enter. So functions are very fast. Not only that, are they dynamic? Well, let's take a look. They are. They update. So when something changes in our data, it actually updates. So it is dynamic. So really, if we're looking at this, calculations are something that we'll never really use when we're dealing with our data. Formulas we'll use when we're dealing with multiplying or dividing data. And functions we'll use for everything else, for more complex situations. So really, we're only going to ever use formulas and functions. But now that we know the difference between those, we're actually going to go back over. I'll just delete the cheat here. Delete it. Click OK. And now we're going to talk about using formulas or functions. I'll zoom back out to get the total attendance. And you're all probably thinking, well, what would we use? What would be the most efficient? Well, I just want to add up these cells right here. So I'm going to use a sum function because that was the easiest one, right? It's the fastest. So in J4, let's do equals sum. And you'll even notice that, Joe, we see what you want to do. You want to calculate all of the attendance. So it kind of guides you too. I love that about Google Sheets. It always has a guide. And that's actually the correct formula, right there. So I'm going to press the tab key. And if you just want to do it on your own, you're more than welcome to. You can still click and drag just to practice. But when we press enter, look what it does. It then says, well, since we did the first one with you, do you want us to do the rest of them? I'm going to say, of course, I want you to save me time. I'm going to click the box. And you'll see now it's doing, right? F4 times I4. F5 through I5, summing F6 through I6, 7 through I7. So it's constantly using what's known as relative reference, right? It's relative to the one before it, following a pattern all the way down. So take a moment, try that out on your own, and then I'll have you do this again, but with a different function. Right now, we just use the sum function. We're going to talk about the average function next. We've learned about the sum function, which we saw was really amazing to help us find the total attendance and also use autofill on the rest of the relative data. Well, the next thing we're going to do here is put in the test result, so the grade, and then we'll see the average score. And we're going to use the average function to do this. Now, to make things quick again, what I'll do is I will go through, I'm going to use the ran between, and then you can pause the video and start copying the same scores that I wrote down. That way you are able to have access to the same exact average once you try the demo. All right, so let's try this together. I'm going to fill these in, and then you can pause the video and fill them in as well. All right, so now that we have our test scores in, and once again, you can pause the video and take a look at these and put in the same ones that's made, we're going to find the average. Now, to use the average function, what we'll do is we'll say equals. And once we put in our equal sign, we'll then start typing out the function we want, which is the average function. You'll see the minute we start typing in average, it's the first one that pops up here. Once we click on that, it'll fill in the rest and even open the parentheses for us. And then we can choose the average of test 1, 2, and 3. Now, once we press enter, you'll see right away, it says, hey, we suggest autofill. And once again, this is super important. It'll allow for us to go through and say, yeah, you know what? This is what I want. I want you to fill in the rest because I want the average. And I'll click the little check mark, and there we go. Now, looking at this, you'll see some of them come with a long list of decimals. And if you want this to be a little more shorter, you're always welcome to format. Now, you can format numbers as percentages, as currencies, monetized amounts, or you can even format it so it doesn't show so many decimal places. So I'm going to select everything I want to affect, and I'm going to go over to my toolbar towards the beginning, and this is where you'll see all the different tools for formatting, currencies, percentages, or increasing or decreasing your decimal places. So I'm going to click on decrease decimal places because I do want to decrease them, and I want them to be whole numbers. I think that looks great. So now that we have our averages, the last thing we're going to do is talk about being able to now take their average score and see if they pass or fail. But we don't want to do this manually, right? We want to use a function, and this function is going to be a really fun one. It's called the if function. It's a Boolean factor, which means we're going to ask the question, are they passing, right? And if they are passing, then put pass, if that's true. If it's not true, then we'll put fail. So we're going to automate this. It's going to be a lot of fun. But try out the average, and then we'll get into the if, and then we'll talk about how we can start to format the entire worksheet to look really cool. The next function we're going to learn about is the if function. Now, the if function allows for us to ask a question. If the answer is true, it does something. If the answer is false, it does something different. So it's a Boolean factor. So what we're going to do first is set up what the criteria is. Let's all click into N1. In N1, we're just going to say that the passing score has to be greater than or equal to. So that's all we're writing in N1. Passing score is greater than or equal to. And then in O1, we'll say that if it's greater than or equal to 65, we'll just put a 65 in there. So if it's greater than or equal to 65, if that's true, they pass. If that's not true, then they fail. What we'll do is click now into our pass fail column, and we're going to start off with our equal sign, type in the if function, and then press the tab key to open up the parentheses. And it's going to ask us for three different things: the logical expression, which is the question we're asking, the value if it was true, and the value if it's false. So the first thing, the logical expression is this number here, the average score in N4, greater than or equal to whatever's in O1, right? 65. So it's 88 greater than or equal to 65. Now we know that's true. It is greater than. So when we put the comma, it's now asking us, what do you want to do if it's true? Well, if it's true, we want to write the word pass. Now it's important to note that in Google Sheets, it doesn't recognize just the word pass. We have to actually put it in what's known as a string of text. So we're going to do double quote, write the word, and then end quote. And now if 80 is greater than or equal to 65, it'll write the word pass. But we also have to figure out, by putting our comma, what would happen if it was not true. Well, if it was not true, it would be they fail. So we would write the word fail. And then we can close that parentheses. What's asking in the question is whatever's in N4, which is 88, greater than or equal to whatever's in O1, which is 65. If that's true, write the word pass. If it's not true and it's false, write fail. When we press enter, it's pass, which is perfect. Now, of course, we're going to want to use autofill, right? Don't want to have to write that 9 more times. So we can autofill, but you're going to notice something in a moment. If we go to autofill right now, well, this passed, that makes sense. But why did the person fail? They got a 72. 72 is greater than 65. Or 90 failed. I mean, this one, yeah, we get it. This one shouldn't be. This one, yes. This one shouldn't be. This one shouldn't be. And so on and so forth. So there's something wrong here. And if you've noticed when we were doing total attendance, right, it did the sum of F4 through I4. It did F5 through I5. It followed that relative pattern, right? Relative cell reference. F6 to I6, F7 to I7. Same thing here when we did the averages. It did average of K4 to M4, K5 to M5, K6 to M6. So there's a pattern going on. But when we autofilled here, look what happens. N401. Oh, N502. There's nothing there. N603. So N is perfect. We want that to move. N4, N5, N6, N7. Because we want to take all of it and compare it to this one cell. So we actually have to use not relative cell reference, but we have to use what's known as absolute cell reference, where we lock the O1 so it doesn't move when we use autofill. So we're going to do this again, but this time we're going to use absolute cell reference in our function. So let's do equals if tab, open the parentheses. Same expression, we're saying take whatever's in N4, and if it's greater than or equal to O1. But this time, we're going to put a $sign, known as anchors, in front of the O and in front of the 1. Now, I will say there is an awesome keyboard shortcut for this, so you don't have to constantly put in $signs like this one at a time. You can use the function 4 key. So if you look up above your keyboard, you'll see F1 through F12. And you're going to want to hit the F4. Now, if the F4 doesn't work when you first hit it, you might have to hold down the FN key, which is usually in the bottom left-hand corner of your keyboard. And that turns on the function key so they work. So for me, I'll press F4 and boom, put in the $sign. Saves you a lot of time. Now that we have the $signs in locking the O1, we can finish the rest of our expression. So we'll say pass. And then if it's false, fail. So it's the same exact thing as before, except this time we're locking the O1. When I press enter, it works beautifully. And now it says, well, Joe, we see that you locked the O1. We can now do autofill. And I'll say yes. So now if we look, N4, O1, N5, O1, data O1, it got locked in. N6, O1, and so on and so forth. So sometimes we do need to use absolute cell reference instead of utilizing relative cell reference. So try this out. Hopefully this works perfectly for you. We have 3 fails because they're less than 65, and then the rest are passing. So try this out on your own, and then when we come back, we're going to actually format this worksheet, talk about some of the other cool features that Google Sheets has to offer. What we're going to be learning about next is how we can format. Now, we have here a pretty just simplistic look of our data. But what happens if I want to add some color to this? Well, what we can do is we can just go in and we can format our headers. We can just go to the top and use some of these formatting tools. Maybe I want to bold headers. Maybe I want to underline the headers. And if you don't see underline here, you can always go to the Format tab, Text, and you'll see all of the different options. And then we can choose Underline. Maybe I want to make these headers a different color. Maybe I want to put the fill color on, and let's fill it with a light blue. So right there, we're already adding some color to this. I'll just readjust all of my widths there. And it looks great. But not only can we do this, I'm going to actually use Control-Z to undo everything I just did. And I wanted to talk to you about different themes. Now, when you go into the Format tab, you'll see that there's a overarching theme here. And you can choose whatever theme you like. Now, if you start choosing these themes, they use different colors and different font styles. So whichever one makes sense to you, you can do. But what I really like is this option here. It adds color to the entire table. If you go up to the Format tab, you can then go over to the alternating colors. And what that does is it looks at your data and it creates a header color and then alternating colors afterward. which I think is awesome. So I'm going to go in to Format, Alternating Colors, and then choose whatever color I like. You can choose whichever one makes sense for you. And then once you choose one of these default styles, you can then go in and change each one. So I might go with this blue. Actually, I like this one a little better. And maybe I'll change this to even different color like that. Maybe a gray. There it is. And now we have a nice style. And then once the style is done, we can click Done. And look at that. Now we have readability, alternating rows, and our headers look nice. And then, of course, we can add in more to this. We want to bold or even underline those. We can. And then we'll make those a little bigger. And everything looks perfect. The last thing I may want to do here, just to make it look really nice, is just center everything. I like that center look. Look at that. That just looks perfect. So now we have a formatted sheet. You're more than welcome to change this. Maybe I want to make this a little bigger, or maybe I want this, student information going across. We can call it student information or student yearly information, whatever you want to put in here. And then we can take this and we can actually go across and we can make this a certain size. So maybe I want it to go all the way to here and merge and center, or maybe I want this passing score to go somewhere else. You can always move these. And what's great about this is even if you click and drag and move this, let's say down here, it'll keep the reference point. So now I'll say that it's looking at N8 and B15 instead of where it was in the O1. So it does update dynamically. Now we can select all of these and we're going to use our merge and center. So we'll merge all. And then of course we'll center this. I'll make this bold. I'll make it bigger. And maybe I'll add in some sort of color to this. Maybe a nice little gray here. Or we can even, if we wanted to, copy this look using this format painter. And we can apply it to this look. And we can even choose what color we want. So totally up to you on how you want this. I might even add that color down here too, just because I want to keep everything consistent. I think that looks great. And now we have our score here. We'll make that a little bigger. Maybe put it to here. Awesome. And I think that looks awesome. You can format this once again, any way you want. All right. So take a moment, try that out on your own, format whatever you like, however you want, choose your favorite colors. And then once we're done, I'm going to actually showcase a couple other cool features like checkboxes and other things that Google has to offer. What we're going to be exploring next is checkboxes. I really like them because they're actually Boolean factors. If you check mark it, it's true. And if it's not checked, then it's false. And because of this, we can do many different things like conditional formatting, if functions, count if functions, and so on and so forth. So let's create a new worksheet here. We're going to go to the bottom and click the little plus icon. And you may have also noticed that I renamed my student info 2024. So it might have said sheet 1 for all of you, but if you click the drop down, remember we can always rename the sheet or even duplicate it for the next year. Once I click the plus symbol, however, it creates a blank worksheet. And in this worksheet, I'm actually going to zoom in here. I'm going to go to maybe 125. That looks good. We're going to do a project alpha. Underneath, we'll just have a couple of quick little things here. Let's do task name and the status. I'll then bold and underline those. And next, we'll do task 1. And I'll just keep this very generic. We'll go through like task 1 through task 10. Something like that. Perfect. And then I'll highlight everything next to it and go to the Insert tab. And inside of that Insert tab, we'll click on Checkbox. Now, once we click on Checkbox, it'll insert a checkbox in there. for all of them. And once again, if you click into it, you'll see false. And if you check mark it, it's true. So if it's check marked, true. If it's not, false. And because of this, we can actually do conditional formatting and even count it. So that's what we're going to do. But before that, we can also change the format of these checkboxes by going to the text and then changing the text color. I'm going to use blue. It's my favorite. So you can have company logos and themes. Next up, I'm going to just say total. And I'm just going to create a simple function here where we count if it's true. Because remember, if you check mark it, it's true. If you don't, it's false. And I'll do equals count if, press tab in the parentheses, select my range, which is from B4 to B13. And from my criterion, it's going to be true. Because if it's true, that means it's check marked. Now, once I press enter, it'll say 0. And then once we start checking, it'll do a count. You can even get a little more complex with this by adding in strings of text. You can do ampersand sign, which concatenates or combines things together. And I'm just going to put a little slash. And you have to put the slash in quotes. We'll then do another ampersand, and I'm going to do a count A. Count A will count everything that you select. So I'm going to select B4 to B13 again, and then close that parentheses. So all we're doing is saying, take the count of how many are checked, put a slash, and take account of all of them total. And that will give me 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10, and so on and so forth. Now that we've done that, another thing we can do is we can actually use conditional formatting. Now we're going to learn about conditional formatting in the next video. So we'll get a little deeper into those skills. But for this video, I'll just do it quickly and I'll explain. First thing we need to do is select the data we want to affect. Then we go to the Format tab. And inside of the Format tab, that's where you'll find conditional formatting. We'll give that a click. Next up, it'll say, okay, we're going to apply the format to the range. But how do you want to do that? What are the rules? Well, the rule is if it's check marked, so I want it to look here. And if that's true, which conditional formats are automatically by default true, then it'll do whatever you want. So I'm going to use actually a custom formula. And I'm going to say starting with B4, right? So I'm going to do equals B4. And I'll put a $sign in front of B because I want it to stay in B. So we're absoluting the column, but we're not actually putting an absolute on the 4. That way it goes to look in B4, then it goes to B5, B6, B7, and so on and so forth. I don't need it to look into C, D, or E, but I do need it to stay in the B column. So that's what it'll do. And now I can just choose what I want. So I'm going to choose to bold it, strike it through, and I'll make this look like that. That looks perfect. And you can also, maybe I'll make this green. Awesome. So now whenever you check mark something, you'll cross it off, make it green and bold. And boom, then we can have everything done. So as you can see, checkboxes are just for the look of checking something off, but they can be really functional with other things like conditional formatting. We're also utilizing things like count it or count all or count A, right? So try this out on your own. And when we come back, we'll get into our closing and then we'll talk about what's up next for the next video. All right, everyone. I want to say thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this course. What we're going to be doing is our next course, our next video, and it'll be Google Sheets Intermediate. There we'll talk about how we can create a table, do some things like sorting and filtering those tables, being able to visualize our data using charts and Sparklines. And then also we'll be getting into things like formatting, conditional formats, and data validation, and also being able to create comments for collaboration. So we have a ton of fun stuff we're going to be doing in the next video. So feel free to check that out. And I hope you all enjoyed this one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you all next time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Google Sheets Intermediate. My name is Joe, and I'll be facilitating today. In this course, we'll transform you from a basic spreadsheet user to a data manipulation pro. You'll learn powerful techniques like pivot tables and data visualizations that will supercharge your productivity. Whether you're in finance, marketing, or even project management, these skills will help you. So let's open up the example file and get started. One of the first things we're going to learn about are being able to take raw data and creating tables. Tables are great for readability, they're great for grouping data, and also for filtering data. We can use tables with freezing rows, and when we use them together, we're able to stop from dragging down and saying, well, what is this data? Oh, fun extension. Or what is this data? Hiring date. And we can freeze our third row. So using those two together in connection allows for us to really make a very user-friendly experience. Instead of having just raw data, using tables will allow for so much more benefit. So for putting this into a table, all you need to do is click into your data set. And then we're going to go over to the format, and we're going to use convert to table. Now be careful, because a lot of times people will go over and say, well, wouldn't we just go to the insert tab and choose tables? Well, that'll actually insert a blank table or even a predefined one by Google. So if you choose tables, it'll pop up over here and it'll say, oh, do you want to enter a blank table, event task, project task? So these are all pre-created already. And there's some really great ones there. So if you are planning on using one of these pre-made templates, you're more than welcome to. But since we already have data, it's important that we just click into the data and go to the format tab instead, and then choose convert to table. You can also use this keyboard shortcut. Once I click on that, you'll see it turns my entire data set into a table. Now at this point, we can do so many different things. First off, we can click on the little drop down next to table 1, and we'll get all of the options. For instance, renaming the table. Maybe I want to name this table employee information. So I can say employee info. You can also change the way the table looks. It comes sort of with this like green heading, but I can click the drop down and it can actually adjust either the table range, turn off the alternating colors, or go to table header color and choose one of these pre-created ones. If you want to get more custom, you can click the little plus icon, and I'll just customize this. I like the color blue, so I'll click and drag. Let's go with, ooh, that's a nice color. And I'll click OK. So now I have a nice blue. If I want to change the color of the alternating colors here, we can always just go over to format, and inside of that format tab there, you'll see alternating colors, and that's where we can change the way this table looks. So I'll give that a click, format, alternating colors. And now I can change my header again if I want to. I have quite a few. Ooh, that's really bright. Let's go with blue like that. Ooh, that looks good. And then for my alternating colors, I'll do white. And let's go with white. You'll see now we can see a little bit of a marker here. And I think that looks great. Now, of course, you can always change these anytime you want. For instance, maybe I do want to make this more of a lighter blue. You could do something like that. That looks good. And maybe for this one, I want to go with a gray. Maybe a lighter gray. And we have just, I'll even go one lighter. Oh, perfect. We've just created our own style table. So this looks great. I'm very happy with it. And once again, alternating rows allow for readability, so I can disconnect between each row of data. Now, if you really don't like that, like I said, you can click the drop down near the table menu. You can always turn off alternating colors, which will just make it that raw data look again. But I actually like those, so I will turn those back on. Another thing you can do with this table is if you want to, you can go to the dropdown and you can actually revert it back to unformatted data. So that raw data I was talking about. So if you don't like the table, you can always change it back. But before we revert it back or we delete this table, it's important to note that the table does have many other features. You'll see right next to the table name that we have views. And what these views allow us to do is either create filters or create groups. So let's say I wanted to group this data. Maybe I want to group it by department. I have so many different departments. Or maybe I want to group it by location. I want all of my building 1 people together, building 2, building 3. So let's do location. And look at that. These are all the people that are from building 1, everyone from building 2, and building 3. Now, this is just a temporary view. You can always save the view by going to the top right-hand corner where it says Save View. Or if you don't want the view on anymore, you can go and click the X. That will exit the view. Or you can always go back to the Views menu where you can choose to exit view here. And it'll even ask you, do you want to save your view? You could say no. And you can always turn those back on. Now, besides that, we can also do filtering, right? So if I decide I want to filter this stuff, you'll see a little drop down next to each column here. These drop downs allow for us to manipulate the data quicker. If you click the drop down, you can either edit the column type right away. Maybe I don't want it to be just none. Maybe I want to specify that this is a text, right? And that makes it a text type column. I can say, well, this hire date is specifically a date, and you can even add the time if you want. Or maybe I want to say that these pay rates, right, are a certain type of number, a currency. I can choose currency now. You'll see the little dollar bill there. So you can change the data types, which can be very beneficial later on, or especially when you're transferring this data into something else. But if you did want to click the drop down, you also have sorting ability. We'll talk about sorting a little later. You can filter, or you can even group. You can insert columns to the left or the right, or even delete the table column. I'm going to say that I want to filter this column. And then I'll get my filtering options here. And once again, we'll talk about filtering and how to utilize this later on in the course. So tables can be very beneficial. The last thing I want to showcase within this table, though, is how we can use this in connection with freezing rows. Because, as I said before, even though we have this table, once we start going down, we're running into that issue again where we could say, you know what are these numbers? I forget what these numbers are. Oh, phone extensions. What are these dates? Are they birthdays? Oh, they're hire dates. So when you have large amounts of data, it can be really hard to determine what is that data without scrolling back to the headers. A quick fix for this is going to the View tab. And in the View tab, we're going to use what's known as freeze, where we can freeze columns and rows. I'm going to go up and I'm going to say, you know what? I want to freeze one row. Right? That doesn't really do much for us. So then I'm like, okay, I want to freeze 2 rows. Well, we're almost there, but it still doesn't do much for us. What we want to do is go to View, Freeze 3 rows, up to row 3. That will freeze right below the header. And now look, you can click anywhere in your data. What is this number? Oh, the phone extension, email, department. And I'm just using my mouse wheel to scroll. So now I'll never get lost or not know what the data is that I'm looking at. This is the hire date. These are the pay rates, locations. Now we have a fully functioning table where we can analyze the data. So take a moment, try this out on your own. And when we come back, we'll talk about some of those features we saw, like sorting and filtering data. When we're dealing with data analysis, a lot of times what we want to do is look at certain pieces of data and look at it in a certain order. Now we saw with the table, we were able to click into this little drop down and we have the ability to sort or even filter the column. So that's a great thing within tables is it's already built in where you can click and you can sort something, or you can click on the filter and turn on the filters. And before we get into that though, I want to switch up our data. Let's all switch over to our next worksheet here, which is sorting and filtering. Now inside of this data set, you'll see where we can select the data and we could start to sort or filter it. It's really important though, before we start sorting or filtering data, that we have some sort of numeric index. That way, whenever we sort the data, we can always go back to the original order that the data was sorted in. If we didn't have the numeric system, well, then we'd never know the original order. So it's always nice to have that index. If I want to sort the data, what we could do is we can go up to the top and we can click over to the Data tab. Inside of the Data tab is where you'll see we can either sort the entire sheet or we can sort the range. Now, it's really important to note here as well that if we do sort this, if we just click into the data and we'd say, okay, I want to sort this entire sheet, it's not going to work really nicely because it's going to be sorting the entire column B from A to Z or Z to A. If we click on that, it'll also include, right, our headings. So this doesn't work nicely. It actually puts this in and yeah, it's a huge mess. So I'm going to actually use Control Z to undo. And let's try that again, but with department. Maybe I want to sort the departments and I'll go to data, sort sheet, and you'll see column F, A to Z or Z to A. And once again, it does the same thing. Now, even though it does sort it, at the bottom here, you'll notice that our title goes to the bottom. It, once again, doesn't work as nicely as we want. So you might be thinking, well, what happens if we select a range of cells? You're going to just use Control Shift down arrow, select all of the data in column F. If I go to data, you now see that not only sort sheet is available, but also sort range. And this is going to do the same exact thing. If I go to sort range A to Z, it'll do it. It'll work nicely. But once again, I have to select the data first in order for it to work like this. So sometimes you have to select an entire range of cells. And if I go like this, I can do C to A. And you might think, wow, this is working really nicely. But take a look at the rest of the data. Nothing's really changing. So it's not working, right? It's just literally changing these cells that we have selected. And that's not what we want. We want everything to then change, right? Everything to be sorted. So what do we do here? Well, the first thing we're going to do is turn on the filtering off. This will allow for us to indicate each of our columns. So I'm going to click into one of my headers here, go to data, and choose to create a filter. Once we do that, all of our columns now have little filter options. And inside of these filter options, you'll see one of the first things we can do is sort A to Z or Z to A. So I can say I want to sort this data like this. And now it's working beautifully. As you can see here, we're sorting the information. So even though they have its own sort feature for the sheet or for a certain range, sometimes it's easier for us to turn on the filters and use the sorting through there. Now, if I ever want to sort this into a original order, I can just go to the numbering system, after you sort A to Z, and it brings it back in sequential order. So try this out on your own. Go in, sort, sort, for instance, maybe I want to sort by division. I can sort Z to A this time I want to do. And it starts with Vermont all the way down to Connecticut. And then I can do that again. I sort this back by the numbering system. Maybe I want to sort by first name, A to Z, starting with Alice all the way down to William. So once again, this is going to be an easier way to sort than having to go through and use the data sorting options here, which are sorting by an entire sheet or by an entire range. Because if I use sort sheet, column A to Z, it'll do that thing again where it also messes up the headings. But just be careful with that when you're using sorting. Always make sure to turn on your filters. That's one of the easiest ways. And then you can just use the sort feature there. And you can even sort by color. There's an added feature. So take a moment, try this out on your own. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about how we can sort, but not only sort, also filter our data. let's say that we only want to sort the data. We don't just want to filter it right now. So you might be thinking, well, when would we use these sorting options? Well, you would use them when you don't have the filter on. So I'm going to choose remove filter. And let's say I want to sort this entire data set. I'm going to select it all by using Control A and then go to data. You'll see once again, we can sort the sheet, but we're going to actually sort this entire range by using advanced range sorting options. Once we click on that, it'll pop up this dialog box. It'll ask us if our data has headers, which it does. And now we can look at those headers. And let's say I want to sort this by last name, A to Z. I'll then click sort, and it worked beautifully. So if you don't want to turn on the filters just to do sorting, and you want to use those options in the data, you still can. You just later on, if you need to change this, go back to advanced range sorting options, say it as headers, and then sort this A to Z by number. Sort, and it brings it back to the original. So that's our sorting portion. But let's say we do want to use filters. See, sorting is good for grouping things, right? And putting them in a certain order. But when we're talking about looking at specific data with a specific criteria, filtering is going to be what we want. Because let's face it, we have a lot of data. We don't always want to look at the entire picture. We just want to look at a certain piece of the data. So the first thing I'll do is once again, click anywhere in my data, go to Data tab, and we're going to choose Create a Filter. Once I click on that, it'll then turn on my filters. There they are. And at this point, I can go in and I can click on my little filter icon next to any of the headers and choose what I want to see. For instance, the vision, I'm going to click on that little drop down there. And I'm going to say that I want to only see maybe Connecticut. So you can either clear all the check marks, select them all, or you can go in individually and turn them on or off by just clicking on them. A quick way would be to clear and then just choose Connecticut. You can even search. If you want to just look for Connecticut, you can start typing in Connecticut and just click on that and then click OK. And now I have only Connecticut showing. I'll know that there's an actual filter on too, because you'll see the icon changes to the little icon. And if you ever want to clear that filter, just click on it again. And then you can choose to select all and click OK. And now our data is back. You'll know that the data is not being filtered because it goes back to the original icon. Now, what's really great about filtering is you don't have to just filter one thing at a time. You can have more criteria. For instance, maybe I want to look at my New Hampshire development department. So how many people do I have in New Hampshire development? So I'll click. I'm going to clear it all. I'll just click on New Hampshire. And then I'll go to department and clear and only choose development. And then click OK. And there we go. I have 3 people working in New Hampshire that are in development department. After that, I can always clear this out. I'll just click on these. And you can say clear. Or another thing you can do is you'll see on your quick access toolbar, we can remove all the filters at once by clicking the little filter icon here. That way you don't have to click into, especially if you have multiple criteria, you don't have to click into each one, right? You can just click here and it brings back all the data. And then you can turn them back on. Another thing that's really cool with filtering is every type of data has a filtering. For instance, I can go in and if I click into like division, I can choose to filter by color, filter by a condition, or I can also filter by values, right? And I can choose what those values are here, like we've been doing. But the filter by condition is really cool because we can say, well, I only want to see things that are empty or not empty, or text that contains a certain thing, or text that doesn't contain, or maybe text that starts with one thing or ends with another, or I need it exactly this text. You can also look at dates. The date is a certain date. It's equal to today, or before today, or after today, or even comparison operators like greater than or equal to, less than. and then some data validation, or even custom formulas to filter. So there's quite a few things we can do here by filtering by condition. So try this out on your own, filter a couple of different things, do some sorting as well. And then when we come back, we're going to change the pace and we're going to talk about not only analyzing data, but actually visualizing it with charts. We've talked about how we can gather our data, how we can sort it, and how we can filter it. Now we're going to talk about how we can visualize it. So let's all go over to the chart worksheet. We're going to give that a click. And we have some simplistic data here. We have 2023 sales report where we have our salesperson, 4 quarters that they worked, and how much each one of them made for each quarter. The first thing we want to do to visualize the data is select what we want to visualize. So I'm going to select from E3 salesperson all the way through until E8. We don't need to include the header here. We'll then go over to the Insert tab. And inside of that Insert tab, we'll go over to the chart and give that a click. Now, once you go to Insert Chart, you'll open up this little chart editor pane, and also give you your chart where you can click and drag it. You can resize it using our little sizing bullets. And there we go. Now, the first thing we want to do when we're in the chart editor is set up our chart. After we set up the charts the way we want it to be, we can then choose to customize it any way that we like. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, I want this chart to be a certain type of chart. I mean, I do like the column chart, but let's look at our options. First off, it has some recommendations and suggestions for us. We can either do a type of chart like this, a column chart, a stacked column, a bar, or even a stacked bar chart. So looking at our data, Google says that these are the columns or stacked columns or bars or stacked bars that we can use. And down low, we can choose whatever we want, whether we want a certain line chart, a smooth line, or even a combo chart. We can do area charts. We can do column or bar charts, pie charts, scatter charts, or even maps, or even other types like waterfalls, or over here we have a radar chart, or even fun stuff like organizational charts, or a table chart. So we have so many different ways to visualize our data. But I think the column chart looks good, so I'm going to choose that one. After that, we can choose what kind of stacking we do. Do we want standard stacking, which turns into a stacked column chart, or 100%? But I'm going to say that I like none. I like seeing the individual bars. We can also change the data range. So if we might have missed something, or if we add another sales reps on here, we can then select the data. Now, right away, it tells us that the x-axis is our salesperson. And we can click on that, and we can actually choose specific salespeople, right? And we can look at what numbers they have for each quarter. So that's quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. Or we can just look at all the sales reps and all the quarters. After that, we can also see the series. So I can click on Owen to see Owen, or I can switch this. Maybe I want Owen here twice. Maybe I want Sophia first. So whatever order you want, you're more than welcome to choose. We can also choose aggregation. So right now we have our aggregate as sums. It's summing up their total sales and then it's putting it on the system. But maybe we want to see the averages instead. So we can click the drop down and choose the average. Or maybe we want to see the count or the max or the median. But I think sum is perfect and you don't have to use these. Another thing that we can do is switch how we're looking at this. Right now we're looking at it where we're seeing each sales rep compared against them each other in quarter 1. We can also look at the sales rep compared against themselves by just switching the rows or the columns. So now I can see Owen did the best quarter 1, Sophia did the best quarter 3, and so on and so forth. Always remember you can switch these. So if they end up being out of order, just reorganize them nicely. And that makes it look nice and pretty. But I like the way it was where we were seeing who did the best overall. And then always remember that we only have Owen, Sophia, Lucas, and Isabella. If I want to add in Noah, right? Because now it's switched, I can add Noah, and now it shows all my sales reps. So if you're ever missing a sales rep, that might be because you switched it and there was only 4 quarters. And when you switched it back, it got rid of Noah. So that'll sometimes happen. Just keep yourselves aware of that so you can always fix that. You also have other things like use column A as headers or use 3 row, right? Row 3 as labels there, and you can choose all that. Now, once we're set up, we're then going to want to customize. So we can go next to the setup button, go to customize, and we'll get all the different ways to customize this. And I like the way they set this up because each one is in its own sort of category, like chart style. What do we want the background or the border of the chart to be? Maybe I want the background to be a nice light gray. Oh, that looks good. And I want the border to be black. I can also maximize this, zoom in, do a 3D, or I can do compare mode, but it doesn't really do much because we're not comparing separate data sets. Once I'm done with chart style, I'll close that and go to the next one, chart and axis titles. So for the chart title, I don't really like the way it says, oh, and Sophia Lucas, right? So we're going to get rid of that. And we're going to say the chart title is going to be 2023 sales report. You can also choose if you want it bold, underline. You can choose the color of the text. You can choose, let's go with, black looks good. And let's make it in the middle. Oh, that looks awesome. Not only can you just choose here, by the way, you can also go in and anything you choose on it, it'll open up the menu. So for instance, if I click on the chart title again, it opens it up. Now, for the series, you can either change all of them at once, apply to all series, and change all the colors the same, right? Or you can also go in and you can choose each one and what you want the colors to be. So what do I want the fill color to be? Well, maybe I want this one to be red, right? For Owen. Maybe Sophia, I want Sophia to be green. Lucas, I want Lucas to be blue. And then Isabella, I like that. And then Noah, let's go with purple. Let's see, you can change them all. I think that looks awesome. And you can also change the opacity if you want, maybe 10%, make them lighter, 50%. You can have a lot of fun with these. Maybe I'll change them all to 50%. I think those look really good. But there's no right or wrong here. This is really just the design part of things. And just have fun. And there it is. That looks like a fun little chart there. And now that we have this, all the series, we can also add in error bars if we wanted to, with percentages, data labels, or even trend lines. We can choose what that trend line is. And I think we're pretty good on those. We don't need any of that. And now that I'm done with the series, I could jump to the legend. How do I want the legend to look? Where do I want it? Maybe I don't want it up top there. Maybe I want it in the bottom. Or maybe I want it in the left side of the chart. Or maybe inside, right? Or maybe to the right. The bottom looks pretty good. Let's check that one. Yeah, that looks awesome. Next up, we have horizontal axis. Do we want to make any changes to the labels, the font size? I think everything looks good. Maybe bold them. I like the bold. Maybe also the legend we want to bold. You can do that too. And then for the vertical, we'll bold that. And then for the grid lines, do you want to change the way the grid lines look? Right now, I just see the grid lines as major grid lines. We can change the spacing, by the way. We can do steps or counts, make them a little bigger. But for the grid lines, I think we'll go with black. That looks awesome. And then not only that, do I want minor grid lines? Or do I want only major grid lines? Or maybe I don't want grid lines at all. Or do I want major ticks? Minor ticks? So totally up to you. And I think this is coming really nice together. I'm just going to leave it like this. I think this will be perfect. So once you have it fully done, you can close out the chart editor. And once again, you can move this around, make it bigger if you want to. And now we have an awesome looking chart. So what I want you all to do is try this out on your own. Just go in, create the chart, choose whatever kind of chart you want. You don't have to do the same one we did here, but play around with it, add your favorite colors or maybe company logos or themes. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about another type of visualization. We saw how we could take the 2023 sales report and visualize it in a beautiful chart, and we were able to format that chart. But there's other types of visuals too. And the next one we're going to talk about are Sparklines. So let's switch over to the Sparklines worksheet. And once we're there, you'll see we have sales for 2023, but we have some different sales here for different items like t-shirts, hoodies, hats, mugs, and gift cards. What we want to do is we want to track the trend of each of these items. And in order to do that, we're actually going to use Sparklines. Now, Sparklines are great for tracking trends of data, and they come in all different types. You can use line Sparklines, bars, columns, or even win-loss if there's negative value. So let's click into F4. And the first thing we're going to do is type the word trends. And you'll notice that it doesn't really look like the other headings. So a quick fix to this is to once again use that format painter. It kind of looks like a little paint roller. And when you click on that paint format, it'll copy the look of this. And then I can apply it to this one. And that looks perfect. Now it looks like it's part of our data. Another thing I may do here real quick is just zoom in, just so I can see my data a little closer. So I'm using the 150 zoom. Now I'm going to click into F5 and we're going to start off by creating the Sparkline. And the Sparkline is actually a function feature. So we're going to start off with equals, type in the function Sparkline, and it's tell you that it'll create a minute chart with a single cell. Once we click on that, the first thing it asks us to do is grab the data. So we're just tracking the trend for t-shirts from Q1 to Q4 sales. So I'll select B5 through E5. We can then stop right here and it'll just be the default Sparkline, which is just a simple black Sparkline. If you want to add more detail to this, you can. You have different options here. Things like changing the chart type. Instead of it being the default line, we can make it into a bar or more. Or maybe we want to do maximum value. Or maybe we want to change the color or the line width. So we're going to go through a couple of these. Let's put a comma. And in order to do these options, we're actually going to use curly brackets. So we're going to do an open curly bracket, and we're going to put in the chart type in quotation marks. So I'm going to say chart type, and that could be all lowercase. And then what we'll do is we'll put a comma and choose what kind of chart type we want. So for instance, if I just do line, well, we're going to get the same exact thing that we're getting now. Make sure, though, you do put the ending curly bracket. So chart type and line should be in curly brackets. And you press enter, there's the line. If I want to change this to, let's say, a bar, I'll just type in bar instead of line, and I can quickly change it to a bar. Or maybe I want to do a column chart. And now I have a column chart. Now, I don't like the color of the column chart here, so once again, we can add more options. And if I wanted to add more options, let's say I have the chart type as column. After column, I'm going to put a semicolon. And now I can start adding more options, like the color, for instance. So I'll write the word color in quotes. I'll put a comma. And now I can choose the color that I want. Maybe I want the color blue. So I'll put the color blue in quote and press enter. And now we have a blue column chart. If we wanted to maybe choose instead of a blue column chart, maybe want a blue win-loss chart. I mean, this won't make much sense because we have no negative value. But if we put in win-loss, if there was any loss, let's say this became negative 600 instead, it will look like that. And then 600 goes right back. But I'm thinking, let's just stick with the line. I like the line chart. So I'll change win-loss to line. And there we go. Another thing I don't like is the blue color for the line. I'm going to just use black. So I'm going to go in and write, or you know what, let's do red. Red, let's see what that looks like. Oh, I like that actually. That looks good. But I do want the line to be just a little thicker. So I'm going to use what's known as line width option, and we'll change that to either 3 or 2, depending on what we want. It's the same thing after we choose chart type, comma line, semicolon to split it, color, comma red. We're going to use the semicolon to split it, and we're going to write line width. I'll then put in a comma, and let's say we put in a 5. That's going to be really huge. That's what it looks like. So I'm going to change that line width to, let's see what 3 looks like. Not horrible, but I might want to go just one smaller. Let's go with 2. That's perfect for me. I like that. Looks nice. Now, one of the greatest things about these Sparklines is that because they are functions, we could just simply autofill. So if we go to the bottom right-hand corner, you can just autofill down, and now we have the rest of our Sparklines. You can add in if you want to. I like to do this for this type of table. I'm going to add in borders. So you'll see borders up top by your quick access tool. I'll add those in, and I'll just do all borders. That way it sort of separates it a little more. And then another thing we can do here is if you want, you can make row 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 just a little bigger. So I'm just going to increase the width a little. And I'm happy with the result. So I can see that t-shirts are, they're doing okay. They were amazing in Q3, but they started trending down. Hoodies are doing amazing. It looks like we've been trending upwards since Q2. Q2, all the way down to Q4 for hats, not too good. And then I can see mugs. We were really doing great in Q2, but then we took a nosedive in Q3 sales. And I'm assuming that's because in Q2, maybe there was some sort of holiday or discount on the mugs. So this is just a great visualization of how we're trending in our sales for our different items. So take a moment, try this out on your own. And when we come back, we're going to talk about analyzing data with pivot tables. Let's all take a look at pivot tables. So we're going to move over to the pivot table worksheet. Now, what I love about pivot tables is that it allows us to really analyze our data quickly and efficiently. For instance, we have the sales data for 2022 and 2023, and we have quite a lot of data here. I mean, the data is not too rough to look at because it's pretty simplistic. We have the month, the year, what we sold, who sold it, what region they sold in, how much we made, and how many of them we sold. So looking at this data, it's nice, but at the same time, if we keep scrolling, you'll see we have hundreds of rows of data here. So what I want to do is I want to take this data and transform it into a pivot table. Pivot tables allow for us to look at the data and analyze it quickly because it's like a table, but it allows for us to interchange the rows and columns. That way we can switch out the information, answer a question, and then pivot to the next question, answer that question, and pivot to the next one, which is exactly why it's called a pivot table. So we're going to select all our data here. I'll use Control A. We'll go over to the Insert tab. And inside of that Insert menu here, you'll see Pivot Table. So we'll give that a click. Insert Pivot Table. And it's going to say, okay, we see here that you want to create a pivot table using A4 to G168. You want to put this in a new sheet or an existing one. Now, I will say I like to put these in new sheets. The reason being is because if you put it in an existing one, it can mess up the data that's already there. So I'm going to choose new sheet, click create. And now we have, a pivot table, right? There's not much to go on. You'll see here that we have our columns, our rows, and our values. So those are the 3 main pieces. We can also filter on pivot tables, but we'll talk about that in a second. So these 3 main pieces are important because this is where we can list our data out, whether we want it in the columns or the rows. And then the values, I would say about 95% of the time, you're going to only use numbers for values. Once in a while, it might be beneficial to use something that's not a number, But always remember numbers can be aggregated, right? You can add them together. You can average numbers. You can find the max number, the minimum number. But it's also beneficial for us to count things like maybe we want to count how many times a salesperson made a sale. That would be really interesting. So we don't always have to use numbers. We can also put in, let's say, the salesperson's name, and it would just do a count. Because of course I can't add like, hey, what's Joe plus Ben, right? It would just be Joe and Ben make 2 people. I can count those. So let's say, for instance, and by the way, you'll see suggestions here, which I always think is great of Google to do. So Google did give you some suggestions of what you want. You don't have to use those, by the way. You do have a clear all button to clear out your pivot table at any time. And then over here, you have all the different fields, which is all of your data just plugged up into these fields. So for instance, all my months are here, all the years are here, all the sales reps are here, all the type of items are here, and so on and so forth. So now to build this out, let's say that I just want to take a look at sales reps. Who's my sales reps? Well, I can click and drag sales rep, right? Or salesperson into the rows, and it'll just list them going down the rows. Andy, Julia, Paul. Okay. I can also sort this or order it in any way that I like. Now, if I don't want salesperson anymore, I could click the X and they're gone. Let's say I take salesperson and put them into the columns instead. Well, if I put them into the columns, right, make sure you kind of click right underneath there, you'll see now they're just going across the column. Andy, Julia, Paul. Okay, that's great too. So I can either list them going down the row or across the columns. It doesn't change the data, it just changes where they're located. So if I put them in the rows, it goes down the rows. If I put them in the columns, it goes across the columns there. Now, if I put salesperson, which once again is a person, right? We can't add people or average people or min or max people. So what would happen if I put a person into a value? Well, the only thing it could do if it's not a number is count it. So if I do that, it automatically does a count, and it's counting everything. And you'll see 164. So the reason it's doing that 164, you might be wondering, Joe, we only have 3 sales reps. Why is there 164? Well, if we go back to the table, you'll see here that we have Julia, Paul, and Andy, but they made 164 sales. They didn't just make 1 sale each. So this is already answering the question, right? How many sales did we make? 164. So sometimes that is beneficial to take something that's not a number and put it into values. But like I said, 95% of the time, you're only putting numbers here. So let's ask a couple questions about our data. For instance, how much should we make total in sales? So I look for sales. Oh, there's all my sales. And since sales is a number, I'm going to put it in the values. Now, you don't always have to click and drag. I like to click and drag, but you're more than welcome to just click the add button and then choose here. So whatever, makes more sense for you. So I can go and say, I want to see sales. You'll see right away, it gives me my number. So now I know I made about 1.2 million in sales. If I want to see the average, you can always click the drop down and choose all different types of functions. Doesn't just have to be sum. I can do average sales. I can do what's my minimum sale, what's my maximum sale. That looks good. How many sales did I make? Well, that makes sense. 164 and my total. But now I want some more specific information, like how much should each salesperson make? So I could take salesperson and put it in the rows. And now it just lists Andy's sales, 365, Julia made 503, and Paul made 409. Now I didn't have to put salesperson in the rows. You could have done this. I could have added it into the columns. And it would just give us the same thing, but this time just going across, right? 365, 503, 409. Or you can just click and drag it to the rows. 365, 503, 409. The data never changes, just the look of your pivot table. So now I have how much each salesperson made. I want to get even more specific. How much should each salesperson make in each region? So I'm going to go to columns and I'm going to add in the region. So now I have my regions going across. and it makes a wonderful table. I see Andy made 201 in Central, Julia made 109. But let's take a look. Andy made 201 in Central, right? What happens if I added regions to the rows instead of the columns? Okay, it just changes the look. Andy still made 201 in Central. Once again, the data doesn't change, just the look of the table. Or maybe I want to add both of them to columns. It's probably going to look really funny, but you can. Look at this. This looks really rough, right? But guess what? Andy and Central still made 201. So that's my point. If you just put in the data into your pivot table, even if you don't choose to put, certain things in rows or columns, it's totally up to you. It's not going to change your answer. You'll always get the answer. It'll just change the look. If you take something like sales and you put it into, let's say, rows, then you'll say, that doesn't really do much for us. So always remember, numbers go into values, and it doesn't really matter where everything else goes. It's up to you. I'm going to put salesperson back into rows. They have a nice, easy, readable table. So take a moment, try this out on your own. Also, know that once again, Google has created these for you. So let's say I clear this pivot table and I want to see, okay, sum of sales for each month by type. All right, that sounds pretty cool. Let's try it. It'll automatically put it in there. And now I can see how much I made for burgers in each month, for fries in each month, and hot dogs. Another thing that's nice is I can go in and I can change it to sum of sales for each month. If it looks good too. And go into each one. Always remember that we also have the ability to do filtering. So let's say I did salesperson in the rows. I choose sales and then columns in let's do region. So it looks like this nice little table here. If I want to see for each month how much those sales are, I can always add that to the filters. So you can filter a pivot table just adding a field like month. Now I can see that I'm filling all the items. It's telling me that, showing all items. And now I can use the filter system. Very similar to the filtering system we just saw before when we were talking about sorting and filtering. So now I can take a look. I'll clear all of this. I only want to look at March. And those are my numbers for March. And it'll even tell you that your month, right? I'm going to say March, May. Now I'm filtering for both. So I'll clear that out. Always remember you can use that filter system. You don't have to, but you can. And then another thing is the sorting. Always remember you can sort. So if I do region, I can do descending or ascending, and then I can sort by maybe sales instead. All right, grand total. Or maybe you want to sort by region again, and then it just brings it back. So with pivot tables, we still have the ability to sort and filter our data. So take a moment, try this out on your own. And then when we come back, we're going to switch gears and get into some data validation. We're going to switch over to our data validation worksheet. And data validation is a great feature. It's one of my favorites actually in Google Sheets. It allows for us to quickly validate the data that's going into our spreadsheet. And the reason this is important is because, of course, we want accurate data. It's never a really good thing when we look at a worksheet and we're like, that doesn't look correct, right? Because then it's affecting more than one thing in the worksheet. So I'm going to pretend for a moment that I'm Sally, right? So I'm Sally Baxter, and Sally doesn't really like computers so much. Very difficult to use them, and Sally just isn't having it. So Sally gets this credit report form, has to fill it out on the computer, and by accident fills in some wrong information. So Sally's like, what's my credit score? Well, I think it's 1,000, right? Date that I got this credit report, I got this, maybe I got this 2 days ago, right? Or put in whatever you want. So I'll say, I got this on 2/5/2025. Or what's your sales rep's name? Well, my sales rep is Rob, I think. I think there was a Rob. Now, all of this data is incorrect, right? So what we want to do is we want to stop that from happening, because when we get this data back, it's not going to make sense for us to even use it. So I know that there's no such thing as 1,000 credit score, so that's wrong. Date acquired, I didn't send it on this date. And sales rep, well, I think they probably meant Robin. So the first thing we're going to do here is deal with the credit score. How do we force a number? I'm going to select from B6 all the way to B12. You want to select where you want the data validation to be implemented. We'll then go over to our data tab. And towards the bottom, you'll see data validation. And that's the one we're going to use. We'll give it a click. Now, once we click on data validation, it's going to open up our pane over here. And it does that there's no rules at the moment for what we selected, B6 to B12. So I'm going to say I want to add the rule. And it'll automatically say, okay, we're going to apply the range to B6 to B12. That's where the rule is going to be in. And then we can choose what the criteria is. The criteria can be many things. We can do drop downs, text that contained, or check that it's not contained, or text this exactly. We can do is a valid date, the date is on or before. We can even do comparison operators or checkboxes or custom. But the one I want to use is I just want to say that the number is between. Since we're dealing with credit score and that's a numeric value, we're going to do is between. So I'll click on them and choose is between. I'm going to say that the credit score is, we'll say between 350 and between 850. And I don't know what the accurate numbers are, so you could just put in whatever you like. We can then choose to show help text for the selected cell. So when they select it, it'll tell them, hey, enter a number between 350 and 850 if they don't do it right. And then if the data is invalid, you can either show a warning or you can reject the input. Showing a warning means they can still mess up the data and they can get away with it. Reject the input means, nope, they can't enter in that data until they fix it. So I'm going to choose reject and click done. Now at this point, we have our rule. Sally's going to come in and say, oh, 1,000. And it's going to say, hey, there's a problem. You have to enter a number between 350 and 850. I'm like, oh, okay. Yo, let me go check my credit score. Sally checks it, puts in 725, and it accepts it. So that's how we can force a number between a low point and a high point. And what we're going to talk about next is being able now to force the. So once again, the same thing. You're going to select from C6 to C12, right? You always want to select what you want to affect. We'll then choose add a rule since data validation is already there. Or if it's closed out, if you close it out, you can always go back to data validation. Mine's still open. I'll choose add rule. And for this one, we're going to say we don't want to drop down. We actually want to do is a valid date, right? Maybe we don't want them to put in like anything weird, but I want it a little more specific. I want them to be putting in, let's say, the date that is on or before today's date. And I'll say today. They even have that option. You can say today, tomorrow, yesterday, the past week, past month, past year, or the exact date. So I'm going to say today. So the date is on or before today. If they put anything after today, well, that's not going to work. So if I'm doing this, I'm going to then show the help text, enter date on or before today. I'm going to reject the input as always and click done. So now when Sally comes in and says, oh, 2/9/2025, enter a date on or before today. Then Sally's like, okay, let me go look at today's date. 2/3/2025. And I think that's pretty cool. All right. You can do exact dates. You can do before or after dates. So it's really a lot of options there to get super specific on what kind of date you wanted that to put in. Now, the last one I'm going to show you is how we can force a list. And I think this one's super important because it allows for us to really put in a customized list of items. And it doesn't always have to be data validation just for them to put in valid data. It can also just be an easier way to select things, right? You can use this technique with functions or other types of lists. Maybe you want to create a project management table where you can choose a certain idea for that table, or maybe you want to do a survey where they have to pick what sort of item they need, or maybe it's going to be like an IT request form, right? So you can use these all different ways. It's not just for data validation. So same as always, we could do D6 to D12. We're going to click Add Rule, and we're going to use the dropdown. Now you can do a dropdown from a range. I really do like this option because we already do have a range. Now, if we were just to do a dropdown, we can't really choose any of these. That's not going to work. But if we do a dropdown from a range, we can then reference these 4 names. That way we don't have to write them in individually. So I can click OK. And now it puts in the names for me. If we just chose to do a dropdown, then we'd have to enter in each one individually, and that takes time. That's just going to be easier. You can also color code these. I do like doing this. I think this is fun. And do a little different colors here. And then, do we want to allow for multiple selections? No, it's only one sales rep per customer, so we're not going to do that. And then there's advanced options as well. Show help, yes. Reject input, yes. And how do we want to display this? We can either do a chip, which is this new style here, an arrow, where they just click the little arrow, or just plain text. But I'm going to choose chip. I actually really like this style. Some of you might like this one more. I do like the chip style. We'll make these a little bigger so they're not right on the border, and click done. Now I'll just make these a little bigger here. There we go. I think that looks good there. We have our 3 rules. We can close this out. And we can just choose, Robin. And we might need to make that bigger as well. And if they start typing in a name, for instance, that's another thing that's really nice about this, is that it starts typing in like Daryl, it automatically searches. So it's a searchable list of the information. So to take a moment, I want you to try this out on your own. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about conditional formatting, right? And I know we've talked about this in other videos. So if you were in my intro video, we did talk briefly about conditional formatting, but we're going to get a little more advanced with it for today. All right, so we're going to go over to conditional formatting and talk about it a little bit. Now, conditional formatting sounds exactly what it is, right? Condition, right? Anything based off of a condition or criteria, the formatting or the appearance of something changes. So I could say that if, right, my criteria is if the bathroom is equal to 2, well, then the appearance is going to change. I want you to bold the 2, or maybe I want the colors that cell blue. So the first rule is we want to select what we want to affect. So I'm going to select from F2 all the way down. You can click and drag. I don't like doing that. Instead, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, which is the Control key plus Shift plus the down arrow, or whichever way you're going. So I'm going to click on F2 and then use Control Shift down arrow. And that saves you so much time. Once I select that, I'll then go over and I'll use conditional formatting. You can find that under the format menu, and you'll see conditional formatting there. So I always like the way that they place their menus. So conditional formatting, right? The word format. That's how I remembered there. Or data validation. I know to go to data. So it's always nice that they use the same consistent terminology. So I'm going to click on conditional formatting. I'm going to open up my pane over here. I'm going to say, okay, we're going to apply this to F2 to F133. And now we choose the rule. Is not empty. Well, we know that all of those cells are filled. So I'm going to choose a different one. You'll see very similar to data validation. We have a ton of criteria. So I'm going to choose that if it's equal to the number 2, then I want you to format it. Now, by default, they've already chosen a color for us, but we're going to choose our own color. I'll choose that little fill bucket. And I like the color blue. If you've been in my other videos, you probably all already know that. I'm going to go with a lighter blue. And maybe this one. Yeah, that looks good. I like this one more. And then we'll just do black text. That's perfect. And then we'll click done. You can also add other rules too, right? So it can either be single colors, or you can do color scales, or you're going to add the rule again. I'm going to choose color scale. You'll see all different types of colors, minimum value, midpoint, back point, or you can choose like, maybe I want to do this, right? There's 4 max patterns. So 1 through 4, maybe I want my midpoint, my minimum value, or I can even say the number to be a certain color. Or maybe I want the midpoint number to be a second color, right? I'm going to choose the minimum value is a light red. The midpoint value is kind of like let's do the midpoint to be 2. And we'll make that like a yellowish color. And then the maximum, right? That's going to be green. I really like the green color, maybe a darker green. And then we'll click done. So if we don't use this, for instance, we'll delete that one. This is what this color scale looks like. 1 being the lowest, really dark green being the highest. And you can also delete that one. So you can have a lot of fun with these rules, picking what makes sense for you. But that's just all the built-in stuff. Conditional formatting can be a little more advanced as well. For instance, let's say that I want to really just look at only the houses that are in Jamesville. That's it. I don't want to look at any other houses. I've set my sights on Jamesville. I'm very excited to live in that neighborhood. So I could just do this, right? I could select C2, Control Shift down arrow. I can go over to conditional formatting. And I can say that if the text contains, or you can say is, equal to, and then you can put the text, but we're going to use text contains, or text is exactly. And we can say Jamesville, right? And there you'll see it's highlighting it. Well, then make that green. I want that to be like a green like that. Maybe bold it. That way it's really standing out to me. And then I can click done. The problem with this is it's still hard to look at, right? Wouldn't it be really awesome if we can highlight the entire row if it's Jamesville? Well, that's not something you can do with just regular conditional format. You actually have to create our own rule for that. It's not built in here. So I'm going to clear out that rule. I'm going to show you now how we can highlight an entire row based off of a criteria. The first thing we need to do is select all the data. Now you can't include the headings. All right. So we want to only include the data itself. So from A to, and then you can even use those keyboard shortcuts, Control Shift right arrow, Control Shift down arrow, and select all our data excluding the headings. And then we can go in, add a rule. We're going to say that if, right, the cell is meeting our criteria, not if it's meeting Google's pre-existing ones. So we have to scroll down to the bottom and choose custom formula. And we're going to choose custom formula. And in the formula, we're going to say, starting with this first cell here, C2, that's the one we're looking at. So we're going to do equals. We want to only stay in column C. We don't want to go to D or B or A or E because it's going to have to look through all that. We just want to look in column C. So we're going to put an anchor, right? We're going to absolute reference column C, $C. But we don't want to put $2 because then that would only look at C2. It's not going to look at the rest of them. So I want to say $T and just a regular 2. That way it knows, okay, starting in C2, we're going to check for something. Then we'll go to C3, C4, C5. But we won't leave column C. We'll just look all the way down till the end of the data. So that's why we're doing this. Absolute on the column, but not on the row. we're going to say starting in C2, if it's equal to Janesville. Now you do have to put Janesville inside of quotes because it is a formula. So of course we need to put it in a string of text. But you're going to find how awesome this will look when we close that up. It's already working where it is now looking for Janesville in column C. And if it does match that criteria, it's not just doing Janesville, it's doing the entire row, which is awesome. So now I can choose my favorite color. I'm going to go with the lighter blue. There it is. And I'm going to bold that. And now I know what houses I want to look for. And it's a lot easier to visualize it now. Instead of just having one cell, we have the whole row. And then, of course, you can use other things like sorting, filtering. So if you remember before, you might have seen we have an option for filter for color. So we can go back to the data tab, turn on the filter if you want, right? Or always remember you can turn on filters here on your quick access toolbar, the little funnel icon. And now we can say on any of these, since they're all colored, you can say, okay, filter by color. And if the fill color is light blue, those are the only ones I want to see. And now it's only looking for that. How cool. And now we can see the houses that we're going to go look at, and we can buy a house. So a lot of things you can do with conditional formatting and then tools afterwards. Take a moment, try this out on your own. You can clear this out afterwards if you want to, or you could keep it. I don't mind. And when we come back, our next topic, you might have to scroll down a little bit to the right if you only see condition and it's kind of cut off. You can scroll down. We have 2 more topics for this video: linking data and comments. So we're going to all switch to linking data after you're done trying this out. I'll go there now, and then we'll get into how to link data, how to add comment, and we'll end there. Linking data is great for taking data that's in one cell and linking it to another. So in this example, I'm going to take this sentence right here that's in A3 and link it to B5. So the first thing we'll do is click into B5 to equals, and then just simply select A3 and press enter. And that's it. You've just linked data. So this data is coming from A3. Now, what's great about this is any changes you make to A3 will then reflect in B5. So for instance, let's click into A3 and replace Excel with Google Sheets. And when we press enter, you'll notice that immediately our linked data updates as well. Now, what's so great about this is if you're using something like a financial ledger or you're keeping track of your bills, it's a very good check system, right? For instance, let's say that I'm looking at, last month, we'll say July, and this month, we'll say August. And maybe I have some expenses from the month before. So instead of having to put those in each time, right? Maybe I want to have it automated so that now when I go through and I add in all my bills, I'll just change that to a currency. Let's say I have to pay a bill minus 500. Then maybe I have to pay another bill. And then maybe I get another paycheck or something. And then another bill comes out. At the end here, I'll do equal sum. And I'll be the sum of all my data here. So this is what I'm left with at the end of July. Now to start off August, because this is going to switch over to August, I can now link data. So I can say equals whatever was the end of July and press enter. And now I can start all over again by typing in what I am paying, right? Maybe I'm paying this bill, maybe another bill. Maybe I get paid, and then another bill. And then we can do the same thing. So as you can see, the linking data is great because let's say something changes here. Instead of getting 800, I got a bonus. So I'm getting 1100. Well, now that I added that in, it all updates because this is connected to that. So if you're wondering, why should I link data? This is a prime example here of why it's beneficial. Now, what's also great about linking data is you don't always have to link it to the same spreadsheet. You can also link from another one as well. So I can go into B7 to equals, go to any other worksheet. I don't mind which one you go to. I'm going to do pivot table and choose fries and then press enter. And it will link it. So you don't need everything on the same sheet. You can link it to other worksheets if you wanted to. So take a moment, try this out on your own. And then when you're done, we're actually going to get into our last topic for this video, which is comments. So we're going to go over to the comments worksheet and we'll start working with this employee information. Comments are great for leaving yourself notes, or if you're sharing the spreadsheet with somebody, you can leave notes to each other. To create a comment, all you need to do is click into any cell where you want the comment to be. You can either go to the insert menu and choose comment, or you can use the keyboard shortcut, or even on the quick access toolbar, you'll see the little icon for comments. So whichever way you want to do that, we're going to leave a comment here for Sarah. Let's say that Sarah is going to be getting an hourly rate raised, and we can't do it right now until it's actually in the paperwork and all signed off on. But what we want to do is leave ourselves a reminder. So I'm going to click into G4, click on the little insert comment, and I can either comment or even add others with the @ symbol to notify them if I want them to do something on this spreadsheet. So if you are working with a coworker, you can mention them. But I'm just going to leave a comment for myself. I'll say, please update hourly rate. And then I'll comment. So now there's a little yellow, you could just say it's a little tag, or in the top right-hand corner, a little triangle. And now I can go in and I can even do a little emoji on this. Maybe I want to smile, or I can even say that this is resolved and I can hide this discussion because I already did it. So if I want to add in another one, I can go in and say updated hourly rate and make a comment on that as well. And then I can go and actually update this. And another thing we can do is if we click more options, we can either edit it, delete it, see the emojis, or even get a link to this comment. That way we can share that link with other coworkers. So try this out on your own. And then once you're done, we will take a look at accessing all of the comments by going up to show all comments and all the ones from before. All right. So take a moment. All right. So now that we've looked at some of these comments, you'll see once we click on the all comments, all the ones that we marked as resolved don't disappear. They're actually up at the top still. And you'll see who marked it and what the actual comment was. So they don't delete unless you click the 3 dots and delete it. If you do want to reopen this, you can click reopen and it'll just bring it back in. But the minute you click resolve, it'll disappear and it'll go right here into the comments. Now you can also, if you use notifications, you'll see all the comments that are just for you. So if somebody comments their name, it'll end up here. In the all comments, you can also see the open comment or the resolved ones. So you can filter, or you can see the comments on this specific sheet only, or all the different sheets. So you don't have to go into each sheet to see specific comments to that sheet. You can see them all at once. Try this out on your own. And then when you're done, you can click to close and I'll meet you back. All right, everyone. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I hope you really enjoyed this course. We do have our Google Sheets Advanced course as well that you can access. So feel free to access that. That will be the next video after this one. And then always remember we have our Google Sheets intro. With that said, stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you all next time. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome in. My name is Joe. I'll be facilitating this class for you today. Welcome to Google Sheets Advanced course. If you're ready to take your spreadsheet skills to the next level, well, you're in the right place. In this course, we'll dive into powerful tools like named ranges for better data organization, We'll get into XLOOKUP to easily find and retrieve information, and also get into some financial functions like the PMT function that handles loan calculations. Plus, we'll get into some database functions that make data analysis a breeze. By the end of this, you'll be working smarter, not harder. So let's jump right in and have some fun in Google Sheets. The first thing we're going to get into is named ranges. Now, named ranges are amazing because you can reference them throughout all of your different spreadsheets. And not only that, it allows for us to not look at absolute cell reference and use Excel's language, but actually use our language that we're familiar with. So I'm going to show you an example of how we would do this without named ranges. Right now, what I want to do is I want to get all of these taxes, and I want to get them by multiplying the subtotals by this tax rate. Now we know that if we click into this and we start off with our equals, we're going to say we want to take the subtotal, multiply that using an asterisk symbol by the tax rate. And when we press enter, that works perfectly. But now if we want to use our autofill handle and click and drag down to copy the pattern of that, it's not going to really work. And the reason being is because right now it's using relative reference instead of absolute, which means that we're going to result in a ton of different errors. So if we look into these, it says, okay, we're taking I4 times J1. That worked beautifully. But this one came up with 0 because it did I5 times J2. It's relative to the cell before it. And it's following those, right? I6 times J3. So it doesn't make sense. We have to actually lock down using absolute cell reference using our anchors or dollar symbols. And I'll showcase that. So we'll do equals the subtotal multiplied by J1. And then we can go in and add in a couple of dollar signs, the dollar sign in front of the J and a dollar sign in front of the 1. You can also, if you want to, use a keyboard shortcut for this. It's going to be the function key F4. So you'll see on top of your keyboard here, a ton of function keys from F1 to F12. We're using F4. And sometimes you do have to press the F4 with the N key, which brings on the function key. So if you see an FN in the bottom left-hand corner of your keyboard, you can hold those two together if hitting the F4 by itself doesn't work, or you can turn on the FN lock to keep it on always. So I'll just click anywhere near the J or the 1, press my F4, and it puts the dollar signs in for me. And that's a nice little trick there. So now that I've done that, it's going to work beautifully. I can click and drag down, and there it goes. And what's happening is it's using relative reference for the I4. So it'll go I4, I5, I6, I7, but it's locking using those anchors, the J1 in place. So now it's I4 times J1, I5 times J1, I6 times J1, and so on and so forth. Now that's great. And that does work for us. So sometimes we do need to utilize that. But as I said before, we're still referencing using Excel's language, right? We're referencing the column and the row. Instead, we want to reference a name. Maybe I want to call J1 tax rate, since that's what it is. And then I can use that tax rate for anything else within the file. So the first thing to do is click on J1. We'll then go over to the name box right up here. And inside of the name box, it'll even say J1. And we're just going to type in there. Now, before you can actually type, though, it is important to note the naming convention. You can't use something like this, tax space free. That's not allowed. So instead, you can use tax underscore rate, or you can say tax rate without a space. Those are both acceptable. Whichever way you want to do it, you can. So we'll go in. I'm going to click into J1. I'm going to do tax underscore rate, and you have to press enter to confirm it. So once you press enter, it saves that. So when I click on I1, it says I1 in the name box, or K1 says K1. But if I click into K1, it now says tax rate. So now all we have to do is just use our language. We're going to do equals the subtotal multiplied, and we can start typing out tax rate, and you'll see it even pop up, and you can press the tab key to fill in the rest. It's the named range is J1. So it'll reference the worksheet and the cell. And now I can press tab, press enter, and look how cool that is. I don't have to use dollar signs to anchor this down. Now, as I said before, what's really great about this technique is later on I can go to any worksheet any cell, like let's say we go over to the if function, we'll be doing that a little later. I can go in now and I can do, I wonder what 200 times our tax rate would be. So I could say 200 times, and I can once again use tax rate no matter where I am. And it'll give me my 17.5. That's what I love so much about named ranges is you can use them throughout your entire file whenever you need to. Take a moment, try this out on your own, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about where we can find those named ranges. Now that we know how to make a named range within Google Sheets, what we can do next is we can actually name more than just a single cell. For instance, maybe we want to see how much do I have to pay total on taxes. So I can select from J4 all the way down to J9, go to the name box. I'm just going to call this taxes and press enter. Now I can use this anywhere I want. I can go in and say, I wonder what the sum of taxes is. And this is great because we're no longer using Google Sheets language, right? We're not referencing Google Sheets J1 or J4 or J9. Now we're saying, hey, what is the sum of taxes? And I can press enter and get that number there. And you can do this with all of them. You can name all of your ranges. For instance, maybe I also want to see how many items I sell. And I can go in, name my ranges items, go over here and do a count. And I'm going to use a count A because when you use count, you're using the number of numeric values. Since these are strings of text, you're going to use count A, the number of values that are in the data set. And now I can say items, and I'll say there's 6 items. So this is a great way to not use Google's language, but use our own language in referencing our different functions and our data. Now, once you've named a single cell or a range of cells, we can now access those by going to either of 2 places. We can either go to the drop down for the name boxes where we're naming our ranges, and you'll see here manage name ranges, or you can always go to the data menu, and this is where you can find named ranges. So either one of those ways, you can access those. I like to click the drop down and go to manage named ranges, and you'll see all of them here: item, tax rate, and taxes. You can always add more ranges, or you can delete a range as well by clicking on the little edit icon and then choosing delete. You can also rename it, change the data range, and then when you're done with all of that, you can always close out the pane. So take a moment, try to name a ton of different ranges, name one range, access the name manager, and then we're going to move on to XLOOKUP. The next thing we're going to be going over is XLOOKUP. And in Google Sheets, XLOOKUP function is super powerful. It allows for you to search for a value in a range and then return a corresponding value from another range. And it's actually an improvement over VLOOKUP, which was vertical lookup, HLOOKUP, horizontal lookup, and also the index match functions. And the reason it's so great is because it can actually search both vertically and horizontally. It also supports exact and approximate matches, and it handles missing values really nicely. So we're going to go over all the fun stuff with XLOOKUP, starting with being able to look up information about this product name. Let's say that we have this product name. It's a notebook. We have it in there right now, and we want to look up the price. Essentially, what I want to do is I want to make this a lookup function where somebody can type in a product and then the price will pop up. But to use XLOOKUP, we're going to start off with equals. We're going to type in XLOOKUP and press the tab key to open up the parentheses. It's going to ask you for a search key. What are we looking for? So I'm going to go over and say, well, I'm looking for whatever's in the cell F1. I'll then put my comma. The next thing it's going to say is, where are you looking for it? What's the lookup range? Where are you looking for the word notebook? And really, we're just looking for it in column B. So I can just click on the B because I want to look through this entire list for the word notebook. After that, it's going to say, okay, what do you want the result to return, right? The result range. What are we looking for once we find the word notebook? Well, we're looking for the prices, which are in column D. So we're looking for the word notebook. Once it finds it in this list, It'll then return what's next to it in the pricing column. And that will give us our price. And when I press enter, look at that, $5. And now it's fully set up. Anything that you want to search for, let's say I want to search for how much a binder is. It will now tell me that the binder is $4. Or maybe I want to search for how much is a printer. And it'll tell me a printer is $100 and so on and so forth. So we can search for this entire list. But as I said before, there's so much more power to XLOOKUP, right? Because it can look from the top to the bottom, or it can look from the bottom to the top. We can actually have a sequential list. For instance, let's say notebook. It used to be $5. We want to get rid of this product because maybe people will still want this, or maybe we're not ready to get rid of the historical data yet. But we have the new notebook, which is product ID 69, and it's now $8. How do we tell the system we want to use the $8 price instead of the $5 price? Because when we look up notebook right now, it gives us $5. Well, that's going to be our search mode. So when we click into this, you'll notice that we have missing value. We'll talk about that. Match mode, we'll talk about that as well. But the last one here is search mode. And search mode just says, do we want to search from the top of the list to the bottom, or from the bottom of the list to the top? So we can switch those. So I'm just going to put a comma here. We're going to skip missing value. We're going to skip match mode, putting your commas in. And I love how Google Sheets allows for us to see what we're looking at. And now it's search mode. Now, if you put a 1 in there and you press enter, it's still going to stay $5. 1 means top to bottom, or that's the default as well, if you put nothing in there. But if you do a -1, it's now going to bring up the $8 because it's searching from the bottom of the list first and then going to the top. So whichever one it hits first, that's what it's going to showcase. So now I have, whenever I search for notebook, $8 instead of the 5. What we're going to be talking about also with XLOOKUP is the fact that if you search for something that doesn't exist in the list, you'll get an error. For instance, I want to search how much Joe costs, right? And it's going to give me nothing because, well, that doesn't exist. So instead of saying nothing, when I search for like a bed, or maybe I want to search for a TV, right? It returns nothing. And people are going to think something's wrong. But if I search for something like a stapler, it returns something because it's actually in the list. So to fix this problem, if somebody searches for something that doesn't exist, we can use this right here, missing value. And in the missing value, you just put whatever you want to replace nothing with. Instead of it just returning nothing, I want to say this instead. Something like doesn't exist or not found. And you want to be sure that you do put that in quotes. The reason being is because, of course, this is a function. Google Sheets does not understand English, so it is being put in as a string of text. And then when we put that in there, if I search for, let's say, a notebook, it returns the price. If I search for a bed, it's not found. So that's another perk, because the old way of doing this, if you had to use VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP or index and match, is you would have to nest that inside of an if-error function. Nesting functions isn't always pretty. So the fact that Google has taken time to incorporate that if not found in there is just amazing. And it's a lot easier for us to utilize. Now, as I said before, the benefits of XLOOKUP are that it can look top to bottom. It's also vertical, horizontal. It has exact matches by default. And that's important because if we're looking for something as a range of information, well, then it won't be an exact match and it won't work. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to XLOOKUP range map, and I'm going to showcase an instance where we're not going to use an exact match all the time, but sometimes we'll have to get an approximate match. But for now, try this out on your own. And then when we come back, we'll get into XLOOKUP range map. In this example, we've actually used exact match, which is the default for XLOOKUP, which means if we search for something that's not exactly matching whatever's in the list, it won't find it, right? So when we say bed, it won't find it. If I put in notebook, it will find it because it's an exact match to the word notebook. If I spell notebook wrong, right? If I do note boo or something, or I even messed up boat boo or something. It's going to say not found. And sometimes that will happen. We'll type in too fast and it won't find it. And then they'll see, I forgot the K. And then you can add the K and it'll work. So that's an exact match. But what happens if we don't want an exact match? For instance, in our XLOOKUP range match, you'll see here that we have a couple of sales reps. We have their sales, and we just want to see what percentage bonus they're getting. And we do have a bonus scheme here, a structure. We have, if they made between $0 and $50, or between 0 and $49,999, they get $0. But the minute they make 50,000, they get a 5% bonus. But then it goes to the next, between 50,000 and 54,999, they would stay at 5%. But the minute they hit 55,000, they get 6%, and so on and so forth. So this is more of an approximation, right? And if I was to just use XLOOKUP right now, without actually choosing any type of match mode, right, I would say I'm searching for sales. I'm looking for it in this list of sales, and I want to return a percentage. And when I press enter, it's going to give me an error because it's saying, well, Joe, we actually don't see 52,000 anywhere in this list. But really, this person, John Smith, should be getting 5%. But to fix this, we're actually going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to say that what I'm searching for is the sales. I am searching for it in this list of sales, and I want to be sure that I absolutely reference that. And then also am looking for the result to be the percentage of bonus they're getting, and I'll absolutely reference that. But this time, I'm going to go through match mode, and I'm going to say I want the closest match. Now, there's 3 different matches. There's exact match, which is the default, or if you use a 0, it would be the default. There is what's known as the lower approximation. So if I use -1, it'll go down to rounding to the lowest value, and that would be the 5%. So in this case, that works perfectly because if they made 52,000, they get 5%. If they got up to 55, they would get 10. But if you do use the other one, right, just a 1, which means it's rounding up, well, then it would give them 10%, which is not quite correct because we want to round down. So just be sure when you're doing this, you're using the right approximation. 1 means it's going to round up. -1 means it's going to round down. And in this case, we need a -1 because, of course, they shouldn't get 10% until they reach that 55,000. So they're only getting 5%. And now that we've done this, we can just go in and autofill. We see Mark didn't quite reach the 50,000. So Mark get a bonus. Sharon, the bonus, 62. So that's between 55 and 65, which will round down to 10%, and so on and so forth. So this is when you would use an approximate match as a little different than using that exact match that we saw before that. What we're going to be talking about next is being able to use XLOOKUP to do some data mining, because really at its core, XLOOKUP, once again, allows us to look for a value in one column and return the related information from another column. And it can look left, right, up, down. So that's why it's a great replacement for VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, and now even index and match. So try this out on your own. And when we come back, we'll get into some fun data mining. Let's say that we have our data all over the place, which is really in most cases true, right? Our data is never just in one file. It could be in different files or different worksheets, or it could be like this, where it's on the same page, but it's in 3 different sections. So we can use XLOOKUP whether these tables were in different worksheets, different files, or even just separated like we have in this example. But the problem I'm having is I want to create a facts table where I have date sold something, who sold it, what product they sold, if they gave a discount, how many items they sold. And I want to know the price of the item and the region they're selling it. So now really what I have to do is I have to go in and say, okay, Christy sold doublers. Okay, doublers. How much are doublers? I have to go all the way to wherever the list of products are, which is in our case here. Look for doublers. Oh, there's the price. And now I can enter in the price, $79.95. I'll do that. And then I do the next one. Okay, cancel sunshine. Go all the way over here, look for sunshine. Sunshine, found it, $23.50. And I put in $23.50. Now, can you imagine doing that? How much time it's going to take? And we have, I'm talking tens of thousands of products that were sold. So that could take us a very long time. But instead of doing that, we can use XLOOKUP. Because if we think about it, it's using the 3 core items we need. What are we looking for? The product name. Where are we looking for it? Products. And what do we want to return? The pricing. So we could just use XLOOKUP, do some data mining. So I'll do equals XLOOKUP. The search key is the product we're looking for, doublers. Where are we searching for it? Column A, you could just click on the A. What do we want to return? B, where the prices are. And when we press enter, how nice is that? $79.95. Now you might be wondering why I select A and B as columns. This actually just saves us time, because if we want to autofill this, we would have to select A2 through A13 and then put in our dollar signs. And I don't want to have to do that. It's harder to read it as well because there's so much going on there. That's why I like to just reference the column itself. That way we don't have to reference using absolute, right? And now when I press enter, I get that. It also gives me the formatting, which is great. Then I can just double click and it pulls out those thousands of rows of data within seconds. How awesome is that? So if you want to pause right here and try that out on your own, you're more than welcome to. We're going to go over the region as well, but feel free to pause and try out the region on your own. But for now, I'll showcase it. I want to now find the region. So I'm going to do equals XLOOKUP. And you're probably thinking, well, how do I know what I'm searching for? Well, my trick for everyone is this. Now do it without using XLOOKUP, and you're going to get your answers. Think about it. Watch. I'm looking for the region, Christy Selden. Okay, so I'm going to look up Christy's name in this list, and I found it. And I want to return the region. Okay, list. See how we just did that manually? That's how we would normally do it if we didn't have XLOOKUP. So by doing that, you'll figure out all 3 things you need. What are you looking up? Christy's name. Where are you looking for it? In this list of sales reps in column D. What do you want to return? Wherever they are selling in column D, the region. So sometimes I like that just to figure out what are my function arguments here. So I'm going to do equals XLOOKUP. The search key is Christy Olson. The lookup is column D. And we're returning the region in column E. Press enter. We're going to do a double click on the circle for autofill. And look at that. That is awesome. And we have just data mined that information from 2 other tables. And as I said before, these 2 other tables, they don't even need to be on the same worksheet. They could be in different worksheets. They could be in different files totally. And you can still reference them. So even though our data could be all over the place, XLOOKUP can really help us to grab related data and put it into another spreadsheet. Now, at this point, you're more than welcome to also add more in. Maybe you want to insert a column to the right. Maybe I want to find out how much do we sell now. I could do price with discount, for instance, right? And in this price with discount, I'll make that bigger there. I can say, okay, well, I'm going to take the price, which is in L2, and multiply that by the discount. Now, if you just do that, if you do L2 times the discount, that's only going to give you what the discount was, right? $2.40. But if I actually want to subtract it from the original price, you would just do the original price, which is an L2, minus, right, the price times the discount. And that will give us our correct answer because we're taking the original price and subtracting it from the discount. And when I press enter, we get $77.55. Double click here, and that looks amazing. And then the last thing you could do if you really wanted to was add in another column to the right, and maybe you just want to figure out the total sales we made. Total sale. And that would just be the price with the discount multiplied by how many units we sold. And then it'll suggest our autofill. I'm going to say, of course, and we get our answers. The last couple of things here, just to clean up the sheet, would be just to change, of course, the formatting. So we want to make this into dollar signs. And also, I may just want to add in those borders. So you can select everything using Control Shift right arrow, Control Shift down arrow, and then just add in borders. That makes it look really nice. You can always use Control Home key, go home, the actual word home, HOME, that will always bring you to A1 cell. And the last thing I may do here is just use Control Shift down arrow, and then just change it to a current. And now our table is looking amazing. We just got all the information within the data. So that's known as metadata, and data mining. That metadata can really help us to analyze the information. So try all of that out on your own. Once again, keyboard shortcuts that are really important in this one is selecting cells. You can either select cells by clicking and dragging, but we have thousands of cells. So I like to use the Control key, plus the Shift key, plus the down arrow, and that will select everything to the next empty cell. So if I click on A1, Control Shift down arrow, that'll select everything. And then if you want to select the next column to the right, you just use Control Shift right arrow, and it selects everything. That way you can edit things quickly. And then always remember Control Home, right? That's going to be the Control key. Plus, it actually has HOME. You'll find it somewhere on your laptop. Everybody's keyboard has it somewhere else. So just take a quick look and you'll find it, and then you can use it to always go back A1 to the top of your spreadsheet. So try this all out, have a lot of fun with it. And when we come back, we're going to switch gears and get into the if function. The next function we're going to take a look at is the if function. And the if function asks a question and reveals true or false as a Boolean factor. So I can say, if John is making a certain amount of money, if that's true, then John gets a bonus. If it's not true, it's false, then John doesn't get a bonus. This allows for us to automate our spreadsheets. So our criteria for our sales here, we have the employee's name, John, Jane, Bob, Alice, Xander, and Shirley. And the sales criteria to get a bonus is you have to make 80,500 or more. So right now we're doing this manually. We're looking at the sales price and we're writing bonus, or we're writing no bonus. So instead of doing that, I want to automate the system. I'm going to start off doing equals if and press tab to open up the parentheses. Now it's going to ask for three values here. The first one's going to be the logical expression argument, which says, what is the question you're asking? And we're just simply asking if this sales number for Don, which is in C5, is greater than or equal to sales criteria. Now, there's two ways you can do this. You can either just write in 80,500, or you can, of course, reference cell A15 and then absolute reference. Or we can use named ranges like we learned in the beginning of this video. So whichever way you want to do this, you're more than welcome to. I'm just going to put in the actual A15. That way, if anything ever changes, it will automatically update. And then I will absolute reference that by putting in my $sign. And we now have our question. Is this amount, 56,285, greater than or equal to 80,500? Now, if that's true, we have to put in something if it was true, or do something. What do we want to do or say? Well, I just want to say, bonus. That's it. Or if you want to get a little more complex with it, you can even take their sales number and multiply it by, let's say, a 5% bonus they'll get. So you can either write the word bonus, and I'll showcase both of these. And then when I put in another comma, now it's saying, well, what happens if it's not true? Well, then I would write no bonus. And always remember to put these in quotation marks because they are string of text. So now we're asking the question, is whatever's in C5 greater than or equal to whatever's in A15? If it's true, write bonus. If it's not true, no bonus. and then it will autofill that for us, and it looks perfect. Now, to get a little more complex, instead of just writing strings of text, we can already just put in the bonus number in there, or how much is the bonus going to be. So I can just rewrite this, and instead of having bonus or no bonus, if it was true, we could take their sales amount and multiply it by 5%. That'll tell us how much bonus they're actually getting. Or if you wanted to add it to the total, you could. And then if they don't get the bonus, they just get $0. Sean's going to get 0, and then we will autofill that. And look at that. You can see who's getting bonus and who's not. The last thing I might do here, just to make it a little more clear, is just add in a currency. That way it looks good. And then just adjust the column. And there it is. So whoever doesn't get a bonus is 0. Whoever gets a bonus, it shows the amount now, and we can write out the check. And you can always mix up the strings if you want. Instead of it being 0, you could write the word no bonus. That way it's more readable. And then have it look like this. But I think that looks great. So totally up to you on how complex you want to get these. But this is an example of using the if function, right? Where we ask a question and it could return 2 results. Something if it's true, something if it's false. But sometimes that's not enough, right? Sometimes we need more than just 2 returns. For instance, I have here their performance scores as well. And based off of their performance score, we get a certain review. So down here are the review rates. If anyone gets less than 60 as a score, they need improvement. If they get greater than 85, they're proficient, right? Or less than 85, between 60 and 85, they're proficient. But if they get greater than 85, they're exceptional. So anything greater than or equal to 85, exceptional. Anything less than 85, but greater than 60, proficient. Anything less than 60 needs improvement. Now that's 3 different outcomes. So if we wanted to, we could use the if function, but we would have to nest an if function inside of an if function, and that could be complex. What Google has done for us is made a new function known as the ifs function with an S. And that ifs function allows for us to have as many outputs as we want, up to about 127. So I'm going to do equals ifs with an S and press the tab key to open up the parentheses. You'll see here that it's asking us for a condition, very similar to if, right? And if it meets that condition, then what happens if it's true? Then it goes on to the second condition. So really with the ifs, it's a little different because there is no false. It just runs through each iteration of the review rates. So we're going to give an example of what could happen each time. So I'm going to start off with the first thing. What happens if John's score is less than 60? Right? If it's less than 60, well, then I would write needs improvement. Now you could just write it in a string of text, or you could just click needs improvement here, right? Just be sure that you do absolute reference. Then we move on to the next one, right? The next thing is what happens if John's score was less than 85? Well, in that case, then John would be proficient. So we can click on E16 and absolute reference. So we're just running through each iteration. If John got less than 60, it would be needs improvement. If John got less than 85, it would need proficiency. And if John's score was greater than or equal to 85, well, then John would get exceptional. And once again, we'll absolute reference that, put our dollar signs in. That way it doesn't move when we autofill. So this looks great. Now we can close this as enter, and it will automatically autofill this for us. And we can see who needs improvement, who's exceptional, and who's proficient. And if anything ever changes, let's say maybe Xander goes down a couple of points to, I don't know, maybe 60, or we'll say 59. It will auto update. So that's why I love using if and if functions, because if and ifs allow for us to automate the system. So we can just go in, put in the new score, and then it'll put in the outcome. So remember, if is great if you have two outcomes, like a bonus or no bonus. And then ifs is great if you have multiple output, like 3 or 4 or 5. And once again, you can have about up to 127. All right. Which is more than enough. I don't think you'll ever get past that, but it's good to know. Take a moment, try out the ifs function. Have some fun with this. You can mess around. You could put in different, bonus or no bonus, or you could put in the actual bonus. Or if you want to get even more fancy, you could take the original sale, right? And you can add that to, if it'll let me do it here, you can do C5 plus, and then you can put that in parentheses. That way it doesn't just tell you how much they made in bonus, but it adds it to their original amount. And then we can put that through here. So this one should be about a little over 100,000 once we fill this out. There it is. So just play around. I personally think that'll be better if we just have the actual bonus. That way we can write a bonus check to them, but whatever you want in your example. And then when we come back, what we're going to be talking about is database functions, kind of mixing aggregates with the if function or a conditional. So things like count if it meets that condition, sum if, summarize it, or average if, average and out if it meets a condition. The next couple of functions we're going to talk about are database functions. So we have here our parent company Q1 expenses, and we have each division of our company, the East division, the category, the bill we're paying, and the total expense for that bill. And we have our North, South, and West division as well. Now, the problem is that I have to come up with a full count of how many bills we're paying per category. So I'll have to go in and, for instance, software, I'll have to first count it. Okay, we have 1 software bill, 2, 3, and 4. Now that's taking me a lot of time to do. Instead, what we can use is a function known as count if. And what count if is great at is counting if it meets a criteria or a condition. So I can say that if this cell right here says software, then look in this list and count how many times the word software appears, and it'll do the count for me. So to do that, we're first going to click in F8 to equals count if. Now, just like the if function we just did, it has a count if and a count ifs with an S. Ifs with an S is if you have multiple criteria. We really only have one criteria, which is the category that we're looking for. So we're going to be using count if. But if we did have another criteria, for instance, maybe I wanted to see what division it was in, then we would use count ifs and use both of those criteria. But for now, we're just going to use a count if, press the tab key to open the parentheses. And what's so great about count if is it's pretty much the foundation for the rest of them. Sum if, average if. When you look in sum if and average if function, it'll have the same two function arguments, the range where we're looking for it and the criterion. What is the criteria that we're looking for? So the range is going to be whatever the criterion is going to be. So for instance, software, where is that going to be? In this range right here. So the range is going to be from C5, I'll use Control Shift down arrow to select quickly, to C62. Now, of course, after we put this in, we're going to choose what the criteria is, which is software in F5. And all it's going to do is look for whatever words in here in this list and count it, since it's a count if. So when I press enter, it says 4. And that makes sense because there's 4 divisions, so there's going to be 4 bills. Now, if we were to search for something else, for instance, I can search for rent, right? There's 4 bills for rent, which is perfect. Maybe I want to see how many bills we have for salaries. How many salaries bills do we have? So it's going to count how many bills we have for each. I'll just put that back to software. Now that we know how many total bills we have, The next thing we may want to do is figure out how much do those bills total up to. So as I said before, once you get COUNTIF down, it will always have the range and the criterion. SUMIF's going to be pretty simple in those AVERAGEIF because they're going to use the same function argument, but they'll have just one extra one. So let's all click into F12 to equals SUMIF, press the tab key, and you'll see the first two options, range and criterion. Those will always be the same as what you used for COUNTIF. So we now know the range is C5 through C62. Criterion is F5. That will always stay the same. But the last part is, well, once we find the word software in this list, what do you want us to add together? You can't really add words together, right? You can't say what's software plus software. What we want to do is we want to summarize the total expense next to it. So when it asks us for the sum range, we're actually going to be choosing column B because that's where the expenses are. So once it finds the word software in the list, it'll take whatever's next to it and then add it to the next one and add it to the next one. So it'll add those four bills together for us. So it's going to be the same range, but in column T, D5 to D62. And when we press enter, we get our total expense of $17,215. And we can go in now and we can start choosing what we want to look at. Maybe rent. So rent is going to be $71,160. What about our telephone bill? Maybe we want telephone. Okay, that's going to be $9,780. So as we just start putting in the different categories, we start to get the total bills that we have for bills, the total expenses for those bills. And the last part is actually the average, which is identical. We can actually take this function, copy it, and put it into the average, because the only difference between SUMIF and AVERAGEIF is they're going to do an average instead. So if I go in, I can do equals average if. Right, the criteria range is going to be C5 through C62. The criterion is going to be F5. And the average that we want to average here, D5 to D62. And now we have an average. To take this a step further, we can also, if we want to, create a drop-down list with data validation. And we talked about this in a previous class. It was Google Sheets Intermediate, where we can go to data, open up data validation, and create a list of information. So you're more than welcome to do that. I really like doing things like that. We can add a rule. We're going to say we want a drop down, and we're going to use it from a range though. Make sure you're choosing that. Otherwise you'd have to manually enter in each category. We're going to say drop down from range, choose that range, and we're going to say C5. And you can even, if you want to, you can just click into here and select and then choose. Now, if you do choose the whole list, you'll see here what happens. It will automatically identify the unique values. That way there's no repetition and duplicates. So I always like that. And we can click done. So if you just want to select C5 to C62, you're more than welcome to. But now we can close that out. And watch how nice this is. Right? We can choose whatever we want. And then we can see the result. How much do we pay in maintenance? $14,000 total. How much do we pay in advertising? $144,000. But take a moment, try this out on your own. Do COUNTIF, SUMIF, AVERAGEIF, and if you want to do some data validation, you're more than welcome to. And when we get back, we're going to talk about the PMT function. The next function we're going to learn about is the PMT function. This function is a financial function in Google Sheets used to calculate the payment for a loan based on constant payments and a constant interest rate. So it's very useful for determining like monthly mortgage payments, car loans, or any type of fixed term loan. And this is a really nice function that we can even expand on to see our monthly payments, and we can get an estimate of how much we pay depending on how many months it takes us to pay it back. Now, what's important here is you always start off with three things: your current balance, what your interest rate is that you got approved for, and then your projected pay period. So I chose 24 months. You could choose 12 or 10 or whatever you like. Now in here, I'm going to do an original, which means I want to take the original amount of months and use the PMT to see my monthly payment. I'll then, after that, change out the months and swap it out, see how much my monthly payments would be if I paid it off sooner, or if it took me a little longer to pay it off. And this will determine how much I paid totally to see, am I really overpaying in interest? Or if I paid off quicker, you'll see you're not paying as much interest to your balance that you took out. So we're going to start off in B8. We're going to do equals PMT, press the tab key. And the first thing it'll ask us for is the interest rate. Now, this is important because if you're doing an interest rate for quarterly, right, that would be 4 quarters. So you would take this interest rate and divide it by 4. If you were doing this, annually, then you would do divided by 12 months, or maybe you're doing it every half a year. So you would do 6 months. So depending on what your interest rate and how you pay it and how it's distributed is what you're going to put here. I'll just do an annual. So I'll do 12. So we're going to take the interest rate divided by 12. Put my comma in. It'll ask me the number of periods for the payment. I'm going to choose 24 months. And then it's going to ask my present value of the loan, which is $6,500. Now that I have this, when I press enter, it's going to say that my monthly payment is $338. So I would take now that $338, I would say take this and multiply it by the 24 months. And I'll see here, we're not going to do autofill, that we have 8,116. So we're paying a little bit more in interest because we're taking so long to pay it off. Now I do want to push this all the way down. So what I'm going to do is the interest rate's going to stay the same. So we will absolute cell reference B4, and the current balance, which is in B3, will stay the same. So we will absolute reference B3. And when I press enter, that's perfect. But for the rest of these, I actually want to rewrite it so that it's no longer B5 it's looking at, but it's going to be B6 or B9 for the 6 month, or A9 in this case. So what I'll do is I'll take this, I'm going to drag it down, going to give me an error because it's saying, okay, B4 divided by 12 and B6. We're going to say we don't want B6. Our payments, right, number of periods is now an A9, and we'll press enter. It will now autofill beautifully for us. And look at this. Now it says, okay, if you pay this off in 6 months, yeah, your monthly payment's high, but how much would we pay total in interest? So I'm going to do equals B9 times the 6 months, A9. And we would pay $6,929 off of our $6,500 original. So we're really paying a lot less in interest if we pay it off quicker, as opposed to paying it off in 24 months, which we would pay a little over, $1,500 or $1,900 there. And I'll just pull this down, and there we go. The longer we take, the more interest we pay. The less amount of payment, the less interest. And you can have some fun with this. You can even do different interest rates and then switch out the interest rates if you want to. So let's actually do that. That'll be a fun thing to look at. I'm just going to take all of this and I'm going to make a copy. You can just hold the control key while you click and drag it over. Right? And I'm just going to click and drag that right here. Or you could just use Control C and then put it here as well. I'll make that a little bigger. And let's take all of this out. And now we're going to do, instead of months, we're going to do here interest rate. Let's say I get approved for a very short interest rate or small interest rate, maybe 5%. That'd be really awesome. And then maybe a 10%. And what you'll notice is I like to put in the original just so I know it's working and matching. So I'm going to do that with this as well. I will put in original 22.3%. I'll make this 15%. This looks good as 20%. We'll do, let's say 25.5%, and then we'll do 27.3%. So we'll put in our original again, equals PMT. The rate is the original interest rate divided by 12. The number of periods is 24. And our present value is in B3. Now for this one, I'll do another PMT. The rate's going to be this one instead, E10 divided by 12. The number of periods never changes, so I'm going to absolute reference to B5. And our present value never changes. We'll absolute reference B3. And it'll autofill beautifully for us. And now I see how much my monthly payments would be if I get a lower interest rate. Look at that. That's really nice. If I get a higher one, it's a little more. But now we can go in and we could say this times the months. And then for these ones, we're not going to autofill because we know we'll autofill in a second. We're going to take the monthly payment and multiply it by 5%. Then you can click and drag. And you'll see how much you paid totally, right? But always remember that this is going to always be based off of not the original, right? Because that's going to be the interest rate. You actually want to base it off of the months here, and you can absolute reference that because we're always going to the same amount of months. That's not changing this time the interest rate is. I know it's a little different from what we did last time. And you might try to do that and you'll get that error there or small amounts and you're thinking, well, what happened? It's because you have to multiply it, right? Monthly payment by how many months? 24. That's going to stay constant. And as you can see, of course, if we pay in 24 months, we'll be paying a lot more if we have a higher interest rate than if we had a smaller interest rate. So take a moment, try this out. This is the interest rate. And this one for this interest rate, you can also do a cross-functional interest rate and monthly payments. But for now, we're just doing a nice little chart here to take a look at what would happen if we had different month payments. What would happen if we had different interest rates? We can always cross-functionalize those. Out here, you can create months going across and interest rates going down. But for now, this looks good. Try this out on your own. And when we come back, we're going to talk about something known as smart chips. It's awesome. Google created them and they come in handy. So try this one out. And when we come back, we'll get towards the end. The last feature we're going to talk about in this course are smart chips. Smart chips are interactive elements in Google Sheets that provide additional context, details, and quick actions related to data entered into a cell. So they can enhance collaboration and productivity by linking data dynamically. And we have all different types of smart chips. We have people smart chips, files, we have calendar events, locations and places, financial info, and even star ratings. We're going to go through each type of smart chip, starting with the people chip. The people chip allows for us to tag a person from your Google contacts. So to do this, I'm going to click into A4 under people and go to insert. And inside of that insert menu, we'll see smart chips. Now, when you click on insert smart chip, you'll see all the different types that I just talked about: people, files, calendar events, places, finance, and ratings. We're going to choose people. And you'll see I can choose my name here. And when you enter in a name there, all you have to do is hover over it. And when you hover, you get all the information. You can send an email quickly to this person, chat with them. You can also send them a video invite or schedule a video event. So this is a great way to interact with your sheet by using Smart Chips. Instead of just having my name in here, I now have all the information in one cell, which makes it really amazing. Now, the next type is a file chip, and this embeds a link to your Google Drive files. So for example, I'm going to go to Enter, Smart Chips, go to File, and then I can add in any file I want, maybe like this healthy eating habits file. And what's great about this is now I can hover over it to see a preview, right? I see the preview of it. I see I'm the owner, no changes since I last viewed it. I can open the preview, copy the link, send to somebody, or I could just click into it and it will open up into Google Docs. Pretty amazing. So as you can see here, being able to link things with Smart Chips can be a little more helpful than just posting like a really bad looking link. You can not get all of that information by just hovering. Instead, with Smart Chips, we're able to just hover over the info and get out, which is great. Now, the next Smart Chip is going to be our calendar event chips, which links to a Google Calendar event, right? So one of yours. So you can go to Insert, Smart Chip, Calendar Event, and then you can choose an event that's part of your calendar. Now, if you don't have any events in here, I'll show no results, but let's create an event. I'm going to go over, let's do this. Let's go to our calendar. We'll create some sort of event. And we'll create an event for this date, maybe a pizza party. I don't know, I'm making it up. And we'll save that. So now we have an event in there and we can close this out. Now I'll go in and I'll insert a Smart Chip. You might have to refresh here, but it's mostly dynamic in terms of syncing quickly. So you'll see here the pizza event. And same as the other two chips, if I hover over this, I get all of the information. I can attach this to a document. I can click on the pizza event and go straight to my Google Calendar. So there's a better way of doing, right? Instead of just writing, oh, we have a pizza event, there's a better way of doing this with Smart Chips because it allows you to always hover and get that additional information. The next one is called a place chip or a location. And that allows for us to enter the location using Google Maps. So I can go to Smart Chip, place, and you could type in what you want to choose. For instance, I could just type in New York, New York. Okay. And now, if I want to, I can hover over that. It'll show me New York, New York. You can even get more specific, right? You could put in the address, and then you can even get directions straight to those. So I could say view directions to Central Park. Let's try Central Park. Let's put in Central Park. That'll be fun. And there we go. Now I hover over it. I see where it's located, and I can click to view the direction. It'll pull up Google Maps and tell me where we're going. We pick a start point, and then we can get over there. So I think, once again, this dynamic, hovering, interactive Smart Chips are so amazing. Last two are financial and star rating. Financial chips display real-time stock market data. So I'm going to go over to Enter, Smart Chip, Finance, and we can type in what we want to look at. Let's look at Google. So I'm going to do @GOOGL. Let's see if it can find something for us here. Try that again there. You don't have to use that in this instance, but we'll do Google. And they have so many, we'll just pick whichever one. And now what you can do is, of course, hover over and see our stock prices and market details when hovering. And you can even click to view the details and go over to stock pages. The last one here is our star rating. And we can do this by going to Insert, Smart Chip once again, and under Smart Chips, click rating. This star rating is really nice because not only is it a visual pleasing icon, but it also, when you click it, has a drop down and the value is in there. So if you wanted to do a sum of values or an average rating, let's say, for instance, we have a couple of these, and I'll just pick all different types. We can now see the average. We can do equals average, and it'll be 3.5. So it's a 3.5 star rating because these are stored as actual values. But visually, they just look amazing. All right, so take a moment, try that out, and then we are going to get into our closing. All right, everyone, I want to say thank you so much for being here for this video. I hope you really got a lot of use out of this. Feel free to check out our other videos and also like and subscribe. I will see you all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much.